Welcome to Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host and producer. My name is James Pagashnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from the Wide Left Substack. He is Mr. Useful Human, Arif Hassan. Arif, that game was absolutely atrocious until the snow started falling. Then it went from awful to fantastic. We need a button to push on terrible Thursday night games to make them weather. I don't care if there is a dome or not. We need to let it snow.
Well, the dome would make it easier to do that, right? Because then you'd have the infrastructure in place to make it snow. So yeah, no, 100%.
That game was unwatchable in the first half. Every once in a while,
someone texted me like, I missed the game. Should I rewatch it? And I was like, on paper, you should. Right, like it was exciting. Yeah. It was like the last couple of minutes were really decisive. You had a bunch of really interesting, cool plays, a bunch of swings back and forth. The snow looked beautiful, but no, I don't think you should rewatch it.
No, that's one of those live television moments. Not one that you rewatch, unless you decide that what you should do is instead of having like, for fun during the holiday season, you have like a fireplace up on the TV, like either Netflix or YouTube or whatever. Instead of having that, you just replay this, like the second half of this game on the TV. I'd be okay with that. I feel like that should get you in the festive spirit. But yeah, I can't imagine sitting and rewatching this. If it were somehow worse than this, and it crossed into the line of that famous Monday night game that you and I like to talk about, that was the Dolphins and the Steelers, where the ball stuck into the ground on the punt. Like, if it crossed to that point, then you could rewatch it. But otherwise, no. And not even rewatching it this year. Like, rewatching a couple of years from now, like, hey, remember that time that Jameis Winston scored the touchdown? It fell backwards into the end zone and broke part of his helmet off and was dangling in front of him as he threw a 2-point conversion?
That was insane, yeah.
And no one acknowledged it until after the commercial, after the 2-point was scored. I sat there and went, is no one going to talk about the thing dangling literally in front of his face mask?
Yeah, it went over his eye for a second, too. Like, the swing, like, it just, like, covered one of his eyes. Which, like, feels like it couldn't happen to any other quarterback but Jameis, right? Like, that was... Yeah. This was, like, a very Jameis game. I did tweet this out and people got mad about it, but I was like, so they're at, like, the 38. And on 3rd and 10, and Jameis throws a pick with like 4 minutes left. They're down 1 point. So I tweeted out, being in field goal range, down 1 point, and throwing a pick is extremely Jameis. And I had a bunch of, it was mostly Browns fans. I had a bunch of people who were like, that's not field goal range. That's 55 yards. I'm like, yep, that is, yeah.
Yeah, actually.
You're like, in the snow. And I was like, oh, come on.
Dude. Oh, whatever.
Yeah, I get, like, and they're like 20-mile-per-hour winds. And did you see that punt? It only went 16 yards. And it's like, okay, well, you got to make up your mind because the punt was going the other direction. So was the wind going to help the field goal? What are you saying now? Because the punt's going the opposite direction.
Semantics for like the sake of semantics. Just shut up and enjoy the fact that
it's funny. Yeah, he threw a pick and field. It's funny. Let it be funny.
This is absolutely a Jameis thing to do. Is for him to go out and say that he's a much better quarterback now because he got LASIK, and now he's throwing to receivers that he can't see because he's throwing in a blizzard. Like,
right? Yeah. Which this was a really great test of his vision, right? Because he had to see through the battery of the radio in his helmet.
And
that was a great throw, by the way.
And for the record, I felt very bad for, of all people, Russell Wilson there for a moment, as I made the realization at the end of the third quarter that he was throwing into just god-awful snow, just blasting him in the face, to white shirts. He was throwing to white jerseys. He could only see like their helmets and their gloves at that point. You see nothing in this kind of weather, and he's trying to throw up the ball to white jerseys. Like, they should have been allowed at halftime to switch to black. That's all I'm saying.
The I mean, I don't know how much that would have helped. I mean, Al Michaels couldn't tell the difference between white and black.
Nope. That was a player thing, Arif. He also couldn't see Brown on the field, if we're going to go that route, because he couldn't see where the ball was going during the kicks. I did have to take the ref's word for it that the kicks were going through the uprights, but...
That was awesome. We had no clue whether the ball was going through the uprights. Which, by the way, when I tweeted at the Jameis tweet, people were like, "You can't even see where the ball is going." I was like, that doesn't matter. Ball just has to go 55 yards. Yep. It sounds like it doesn't even matter where it goes. Sounds like you're infinite field goal range, really.
I just imagine the two refs looking at each other, shrugging and putting their arms up. Like, sure. And with that expression of joy, welcome to this episode of Norse Code. We have a game to preview. The Vikings are going to Chicago, and as such, we have the Bears game to look over. We have a special guest on. He's been on the show many times. We'll be talking with him in just a moment. And we have the mailbag as well. But before we start, again, thank you guys so much for listening to Norse Code. If you enjoy the show and would like to help us out financially, there's a couple of different options for you. You can go over to patreon.com/NorseCode for $3.50 a month, or a little less for the year subscription. You get access to the Discord, bonus episodes, all of that. I'll have a new bonus episode out next week for you. Just a special note, because this is something that's just now become available and has been something that people have requested in the past. You can now buy Patreon subscriptions for other people now. Which you
I didn't know that.
You were not able to do that in the past. So that is something that you can do over on Patreon. So if you have a friend who is also a listener and would like to have access to this, and are cool with spending $3.50 a month or $37 whatever it is for the year, just being like, hey, here's a Patreon subscription for Christmas. That is an option over at patreon.com/NorseCode. And a special thank you to Alex for signing up over there. Really appreciate it. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode as well for a one-time donation, or you can go to the wonderful norsecode.threadless.com and pick up any number of wonderful Christmas items. I believe they're actually going to be having a sale here shortly as well on the t-shirts, so check that out. Black Friday deals or whatever. But yep, norsecode.threadless.com. We have a wonderful variety of shirts, baby onesies. I think they sell skateboards at some point. But there's all sorts of lovely items. I was going to get a Norse Code skateboard and bring it to the live show, but that guarantees someone's getting hurt, and it's probably going to be me. So,
it's because you don't have to. Do we sell wheels too? Because I think it just sells the board and not the wheels.
Oh, it's just the deck? Fantastic. Well, that would make me feel slightly better, but still, I'm not bringing that to the live show. But speaking of the live show, just a reminder that in Eagan, Minnesota, Union 32 Craft House, December 12th. We are having our live show this year. We're going to have a bunch of people there. We are going to be giving out some free merchandise. We're going to be giving away 2 tickets to the Bears Vikings Monday night game, which will be fantastic in Minneapolis. So check that out. Again, Union 32 Craft House. We've had live shows there before. They were fantastic. We loved packing the place. I promise to those who were there in the past, there will be additional speakers, so you'll be able to hear us a little better than you were last year, or 2 years ago rather. So check us out. Union 32 Craft House, December 12th, Eagan, Minnesota. We are really looking forward to it. And I also am looking forward to giving Arif his Christmas gifts that day. So check us out, Union 32 Craft House.
I feel like the way you say that.
Remember if I properly thanked you for the bingo shirt that Don gave me at at Union 32.
All right.
I can't remember if I properly thanked you for that, but I do. Maybe these gifts I have will do justice to that. So
So see, this is what I mean by how the gifts are a threat, and actually
the gifts are not a threat. I appreciated the shirt.
No, you didn't. We don't gotta lie. The whole point was that you wouldn't appreciate it. Also, I didn't buy it. I just want to be clear. I didn't buy it.
You helped facilitate the delivery of,
which is a very minor role in the whole thing.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm facilitating the purchase and the delivery now that I'm thinking about it.
Right, which is a major role because you're doing the whole thing.
Yeah, well...
Anyway, I looked up the skateboards, and you can buy just the deck, or you can buy... There's 3 different versions of a complete board, like basic, premium, and pro. And then also just with hanging hardware in case, you don't actually want to skateboard on it. So a surprising array of options for the Norse Code 10th anniversary skateboard.
A thing that you probably didn't even know existed until this conversation. But yeah, check it out, the Threadless store. But we will be doing the live show, and Arif will be taking these 2 items home and enjoying them. So let's go to our interview that Arif conducted earlier today with Locked On Bears' Lorin Cox. He's been on the show a number of times, but this is an interview that Arif conducted earlier today.
All right, I'm here with Lorin Cox, who on X, the Everything app, is still Cox Sports 1, but on Blue Sky has betrayed me, has taken the name Lorin Cox.bsky.social. What's up, dude?
Listen, there is a mid-40-year-old woman on Twitter who has @Lorin Cox and has had it my entire 13, 14 years of being on Twitter. She is my sole arch rival, the bane of my existence, and she never uses it, and I've been trying to get that handle for years, so I took it on Blue Sky because it's mine.
When you say trying to get the handle for, do you mean you sent like one DM?
Like add tweet and add DM, yeah.
I've been trying to get this for years. All right, man. Yeah, we're here to talk about the Bears, I guess. I don't know. It feels like there's like a sense of optimism, but it's just overlaid with overall a malaise, a pessimism that overwhelms the few points of light that we're seeing with the Bears. Am I reading that right?
Sort of. It's been kind of an optimism roller coaster. So like 7 days ago, there was very little hope. Then they fired their offensive coordinator and it was like, okay, maybe there's something here. And then they played better against the Packers. So like optimism is like trying to rebirth, but like they still lost that game. So it's like, oh,
right. No, yeah, they still missed it. Well, missed is maybe a strong word, but they still missed the kick, right? It just feels like even in the best moments this year, it's not happening.
Matt Eberflus has a pretty strong pension. People are now tracking like games where he's had over a 95% win percentage that they lost or win probability.
Yeah, I've heard about this. Yeah, tell me about this. He's lost like 7 or so games where he's had a 95% win probability, something like that.
I think the threshold's a little bit lower. It's like 75 or 80% win probability, but there's been like 4 or 5 that have been 99%. Yeah, I mean, the big 2 examples, I can't remember the previous year's ones that well because we weren't really expecting him to win those games when they were supposed to be bad anyway. But like, it's the Hail Mary at the end of the Commanders game and the blocked field goal at the end of the Packers game where it's like, this has been handed to you on a silver platter and we've already started celebrating the victory. And then it's like, oh, wait, we lost? Oh, how did that happen? Wait a minute. Wait, let's back up here. And then you kind of find the decisions along the way that maybe contributed to that from the coaching staff.
If I recall correctly, Tyreek Stevenson refused to attend practice after he got benched for being maybe the world's largest jackass on a Hail Mary.
Yeah, that's correct. And they've since smoothed things over, but continue to rotate him out because he's also playing like dog shit. Like it's kind of
rules.
There's the discipline you because you were a jackass, and then there's also the hey, wait a minute, like could you stop giving up?
Wait, you might not even need to be out here.
Yeah, wait a minute, like you want to go bark at the fans? You can just go do that from the sideline. We'll just play Terrell Smith, like he can handle it. Minnesota grad Terrell Smith, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely, a genuinely good player, Terrell Smith. That's unnerving. I've been in a spot where you don't want to cast too harsh a spotlight on yourself because then people will kind of realize like, hey, wait a second, you shouldn't even be out here. So I kind of sympathize, but I probably wouldn't have made more of a stink afterwards. Anyway, I want to
Twitter meme, right, where it's fucked around.
I've accidentally become important at work.
This sucks. Like,
yeah, that's perfect. No, I want to talk about Thomas Brown, 5'8" running back who somehow lasted 3 years in the NFL, has now become the offensive coordinator of the Bears. Evidently such a good offensive coordinator that Brian Perez called for his immediate promotion to head coach after 1 week. Brian Perez, for people unfamiliar, part of Bears Twitter, part of Draft Twitter. Ran Draft Breakdown for a while. So I don't know how big a voice he is, but to me that suggests that Bears fans are not just sick of Matt Eberflus, but enamored with the new offensive coordinator. Tell me about him.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment of the situation. But it's kind of a like anyone would be better feeling. So this Thomas Brown guy had a really positive game against the Packers. Let's not say great game, but like when the bar was really low and then you had like a at very least competent offensive coordinator, it's like, okay, hand him the keys to the city. Like we don't know what that looks like most of the time around here. So yeah, like for example, friend of the show, Matt Waldman, has reported from talking to people around the Chicago Bears organization that when Shane Waldron was offensive coordinator, they weren't often telling Caleb Williams exactly how deep his drop should be, how many steps his drop should be.
Wait, whoa, what?
He said as many as you need, like just kind of wing it back there. Like, there was not clear direction on, hey, this is a 7-step drop. This is a 5-step drop.
Excuse me?
Yeah. Like Thomas Brown comes in and says, hey, this curl route, you should take 3 steps, stop and throw it then instead of just kind of winging it. Like that's the level that we're working from here. So,
oh, Christ. Well, okay. That's okay. So that's just more an indictment of Shane Waldron. To me, that's not like head coach material. That's just normal.
Yes. But that's why when Thomas Brown comes in, it's like, hey, like pre-snap motion helps a rookie quarterback. Maybe we should do some more of that. Like, it's like, holy crap, fire the head coach, give this guy the gig. He knows what he's doing here. He did a lot of things. He condensed the formations. He put in more pre-snap motion, more play action. The tighter formations made the screens more effective instead of trying to throw it as wide as possible. And then the defense has more time to cover ground and tackle on those plays. Like he just like took what Waldron was doing and like added some common sense to it, which like wasn't like some genius offensive coordinator stuff. It was just like basic stuff. And so he's kind of the golden boy right now. But I just have this feeling that Brian Flores' defense is going to remove some of that new offensive coordinator smell, and we'll kind of get back to saying, oh yeah, wait a minute, there's still some real problems here that changing play callers won't just magically fix.
One element that people have been talking about this offense, and this is a good time to like transition to talk about Caleb Williams in general, is that this was the fastest time to throw that Williams has had. A lot of people are saying, hey, a lot of that probably has to do with the new offensive coordinator, which now that you've described this drop back thing does actually seem to make sense. But Caleb Williams' play style, he like holds on to the ball, right? So given that is kind of poison against a Brian Flores defense, poison against a lot of defenses, but specifically the Brian Flores defense, what tendency do you think is going to win out? The ability to get rid of the ball quickly because of the way the offense is designed, or maybe a little bit of hero ball stuff?
Yeah, I think they've tried to beat a lot of the hero ball stuff out of Caleb.
Is that a good idea?
Say that again?
Is that a good idea?
No, but that's usually not the criteria that is deciding things in Chicago. No, the whole emphasis is, hey, don't turn the ball over. Don't make mistakes. Just stay in the pocket, be a pocket passer, and take care. Honor the football is what Matt Eberflus says. We got to honor the football.
Jesus.
So, because you may famously remember that in HIT's principle, the T stands for the ball. So, you really got to honor that in Chicago. And so, yeah. So, I mean, like against the Packers, they kind of said, listen, if you're going to escape the pocket, just take off past the line of scrimmage. Take the free 5 yards of rushing instead of hanging back there because, hey, listen, like no one's getting open on these scramble drills anyway. So you're just taking sacks and throwing it away. So just, if you're going to escape the pocket, just run with it. I mean, you can keep your eyes downfield, but pretty much just run with it. And that was kind of a new revelation because he wants to naturally, hang on to the ball and wait for something to get open and make those big plays that he did at USC 8 seconds after the ball's been snapped. And they kind of just said, we can't do that here right now. We're not competent enough. Sorry, just be boring, please.
So what are your kind of long-term, after we've seen, 10 games of Caleb, what are your long-term projections for him? How have they updated since the draft?
It's so hard to say now, right? I mean, because coming into the draft, right? I mean, the narrative was this is one of the best situations a rookie quarterback has maybe ever come into. Certainly a number 1 overall pick quarterback starting week 1. He was supposed to have 3 great receivers in DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, and Keenan Allen, a pretty competent tight end in Cole Kmet. They just upgraded at running back and DeAndre Swift, or so they claimed they'd be upgrading at running back. I personally, Khalil Herbert, Roshan Johnson, I think aren't that far off, but nonetheless, he was supposed to have all these weapons, and Shane Waldron had made it work with Geno Smith in Seattle, so he should have the coordinator that can work even with a mediocre quarterback like Geno Smith, and then a great Matt Eberflus defense. Things should totally take off. Expectations got too high then, and the offense coordinator's been fired. Offense obviously is nowhere near what we expected to be supporting cast wise. So then now it's really hard to project Caleb until we know who's going to be coaching him in 2025, because the emphasis for Bears fans went from we need this guy to be great to, let's just not ruin this guy the rest of the season. Like, we were getting into the bad habit territory of like, gosh, are they just going to break him like they've broken so many other young quarterbacks? And it's just trying to hold on, get through the end of the season without him having developed these terrible bad habits or anything that's going to make him unfixable.
Holding the Bears responsible for misdeveloping Kyle Orton.
Hey man, they should have played him. I still think they should have played him in the Super Bowl over Rex Grossman, but that's I'm going to play with that one.
So I've heard some rumors about Tyson Bagent's dad. Are they true?
If you read my YouTube comments, definitely. I have so many people every day that are like, bench this Caleb Williams bum, put Tyson Bagent in there. He's a real quarterback. And I assume they're all just burners of Tyson Bagent's dad, but he's got a lot. So it's
perfect.
It's messy. No, I mean, I think Bagent's dad has been a very visible scapegoat here, where it's like, okay, for I don't know if Vikings fans know, Tyson Bagent's dad is a world champion arm wrestler. He's kind of a celebrity in his own right. He's the most famous dad of a backup quarterback in the NFL. That's not a former quarterback himself, I should say. And so, yes, he's naturally like a name that people can point to and say, oh, he must be a source of all this stuff because he's too much of a celebrity and he's a distraction or whatever. But like, I don't know, it seems pretty normal to me that a guy might want his son to be the starting quarterback on a team where the offense is struggling like that. I don't think Travis Bagent's a bad guy. I don't think he's like intentionally leaking a bunch of stuff to the media to try and cause a firestorm. I think he talks to the media probably more than you'd like. And he says, hey, yeah, my son should start. And there's probably a couple other players in that locker room that also think my son should start. And I think you'd find that in a lot of locker rooms that, yeah, 1 or 2 players out of 55 plus 16 on the practice squad or whatever, 1 or 2 of those players might think, hey, maybe we should make a quarterback change. That seems relatively normal to me. What's not normal is how much keeps leaking out of this locker room and how many reports there are of X, Y, or Z, and how much players will just publicly disagree with their head coach with their name on it to the media and say something directly contradictory to whatever Matt Eberflus had just said.
Okay, so trouble in paradise is what I'm hearing.
Paradise. Yes. Trouble in hell. Yes.
Someone's raising a ruckus in hell. What's going on?
I wasn't expecting all these sharp pokes.
Well, okay, let's talk a little bit about that remarkable, wonderful, vaunted supporting cast. Why aren't any of these awesome receivers getting open? What in the world is going on? DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, Keenan Allen.
Yeah, I think it's sort of a different diagnosis for each one. It's kind of like the things that are going wrong, that could go wrong for each one, are all in different ways. So, like, for example, Shane Waldron was using Keenan Allen in ways that didn't feel like it was fitting Keenan Allen's skill set at this stage of his career. It was a lot more vertical, a lot more stems on routes. Like, you'd think you trade for him at this stage, savvy physical route runner who can make the quick move underneath and kind of be that wide receiver security blanket for your receiver. And instead he's running 5, 8, 10-yard stems before breaking out or whatever. And you're not really like, you're asking him to be a speedier, more vertical receiver in your offense when that just doesn't seem like how he should be used. And then for somebody like DJ Moore, he's somebody who is he's a little bit undisciplined in his routes, not in like his footwork, but just in like angles and depths and stuff where he'll kind of round stuff off and like just isn't like, from a scheme standpoint, isn't exactly where he needs to be. Like, he can create the separation, just not where the separation is supposed to be. So like, Caleb's had a lot of trouble kind of adjusting to expecting DJ Moore to be precisely in one spot, and he's not precisely in that spot, despite having a lot of great route running skills. to be a better wide receiver. And then Rome Odunze is a rookie. I mean, I think he's probably getting open at a pretty consistent rate. I mean, I know the separation numbers are good to great, but I think he's a guy who they kind of use as more of that true vertical deep threat. So you're not asking him to run a full gamut of routes at this point to really maximize the skill set that we saw at Washington, where he could just he could smoke anybody and get open wherever he was on the field. Like, it's just been hard to get every piece of this puzzle put in the exact right spots, even though you like those puzzle pieces all individually.
So with a new offensive coordinator, do we think that Keenan Allen will be used in a way that makes a bit more sense for him?
I think we've seen the beginnings of that. It's just hard with a one game sample size against Green Bay. It looked to me like he was being used more underneath and over the middle and with quick opening routes there. But it's hard to trust when new offensive coordinator was also the guy running the Carolina Panthers offense last season. And those are the only two examples we had of him being an offensive coordinator. We need to see more before we're like, oh yes, all of these problems have been fully solved.
So you're not putting him at head coach yet?
So, I mean, I'd put him at interim head coach for the rest of the year because it's better than Matt Eberflus. But like, I was stunned to see him on the NFL Network list of like up and coming coordinators that you should keep an eye on. It's like, I think they're throwing him a bone there.
Well, we're doing this so that we can get sources later down the road. Yeah, I've been there.
According to enemy of the show, Luke Braun of Locked On Vikings, apparently Kevin O'Connell had wanted Thomas Brown on his staff initially and wasn't able to get him. He was blocked by McVay a couple years ago. So, Thomas Brown's well liked in a lot of offensive coaching circles here. But again, like expecting him to be the savior of this offense is the bar's much lower than that. Like, just, hey, if you can just give us an average offense around here, that would be great.
Awesome. Let's talk a little bit about this running back situation. I've never been a huge DeAndre Swift fan. Always felt like just a pure athleticism guy, didn't have a ton of patience, didn't have a ton of vision. So I've been taking a bunch of unders on him, and recently I've been getting burned. What's up? Is he good?
I think he's the same running back he's always been, where it's like he is such an athlete that if you just take enough swings at the fences, he's going to break away a couple of them and make a couple guys miss. And I mean, he broke Xavier McKinney's ankles in the Packers game. And
that did rule. That was awesome. Yeah.
Very rewarding, especially because McKinney was talking a bunch of trash before that game started. So like he's had a couple of those breakaway runs where it's just like, oh yeah, this is a top-notch athlete who's a better athlete than a lot of other players in the field. But like, so it's just a variance thing, right? He'll kind of be mediocre for a while and then have the big play and it all evens out. And then when he doesn't have the big play, he has a bad game. So it's like, I think on a per snap, on any given run, you're not that scared of Swift, but then he has the big one and you're like, oh, okay, there's the ball game right there. That's what brings his whole performance together. Whereas I always felt like guys like Khalil Herbert, rest in peace, and Roschon Johnson, snap to snap, are going to give you on any given run, they're going to give you an extra yard or two than you're going to get from Swift, but Swift will just be able to make that big play. And I think overall for the Bears, like when they brought in DeAndre Swift, the idea was like, this guy's going to be an upgrade in the passing game. And that's where it really hasn't come to fruition yet. And I think that's more about the offense as a whole struggling as opposed to Swift being bad in the passing game. But like, that was the whole sell. It was like, listen, Herbert's a good runner, but he's not a great receiver. So like, let's get this guy in there to be a pass catcher out of the backfield to add another weapon for Caleb. And it still hasn't panned out in that way, the same way that the other weapons haven't.
So in defensive rush EPA per play, the distance between the Vikings, who are number 1, and the Ravens, who are number 2, is the same as the distance between the Ravens, again at number 2, and the Bears at number 14. This seems to be a fairly effective run defense. Maybe I'm understating that a little. This seems to be a dominant ass run defense. Do you think Swift could break one out, or no?
Probably not, is what I would say. Honestly, I'm still stuck on the Bears being 14th. I would have guessed that was bottom 10, bottom 5 with how bad their run defense has been. But no, this Bears offensive line isn't particularly great in either department. I know we'll get there in a minute, I'm sure. But like in the running game, it's felt like it's been more of a struggle there. I think the way for Swift to have a breakout one in this game is not from like wearing him down and on the 15th carry, he's finally going to break through. But it's like somebody on the Vikings messes up in like just a big oopsie way. The end man on line of scrimmage just misses the tackle, and then it's a foot race from there where it's not like, oh, wow, what a great scheme play from the Bears, or oh wow, like what a superhuman play from DeAndre Swift. It's like, oh yeah, that guy messed up, and all it takes sometimes is to get lucky and one guy messes up and you can break away. But no, I expect this to be like DeAndre Swift, 15 carries for 50 yards in this game, and it's kind of a slug. But maybe Caleb scrambles for a couple, because that seems to be the new wrinkle of this offense.
Excellent. Okay, I'm putting that in Prize Picks now. No one gamble. Read my piece on how you shouldn't gamble. But that's the 100% lock of the week. I'm holding you accountable.
Is that piece called the Bible or what? Like what?
You know me. I'm very religious. Let's talk about the tight ends a little bit before we get to the offensive line. Cole Kmet. Speaking of over-unders, I took this guy as over. Am I a fool?
For this week specifically?
No, just like the season.
Oh, just like the season. Yes, absolutely a fool.
What happened? What's going on? Why is JT O'Sullivan's favorite tight end doing so poorly?
JT O'Sullivan loves to hate a lot of the Bears receivers, but the drama there is so entertaining. And I do love JT. That wasn't a shot at him or anything. It's just funny. Like,
it's great.
Doesn't believe in DJ Moore as a top receiver, doesn't believe in Cole Kmet, and yet still has hope for this Bears offense. And that's why we do too around here, right? But for whatever reason, they just haven't found ways to involve Cole Kmet in the offense. And some of it has been just like purely playing time stuff where they'll just, like he's still the number one tight end for sure, but like there's a big difference between playing 55% of the snaps and 95% of the snaps. And we've seen him fluctuate between the two quite a bit. And then I think in terms of a passing concept, he's rarely early in the progression. And I think it's kind of the point where like Caleb's under pressure after getting through his first or second or maybe even third read in the progression. Then the whole play breaks down. And like generally on the scramble drill, the tight end's not the one who's going to make a move and get open at the last minute. They're going to kind of just be a big body that you maybe can throw it up to. And then Caleb's been a little bit less inclined to throw those. I think he's looking for, on those scramble drills in particular, looking for more of a clear window as opposed to a contested catch type of situation. So I think it's been kind of more how he's been used as opposed to like he's had some big drop off overall. And that was something we kind of anticipated coming in. Shane Waldron generally like uses multiple tight ends and doesn't have like one big focal tight end coming from Seattle. Like, when you had Noah Fant and Colby Parkinson and all them, you would see the difference between the number one and number two tight end be a lot smaller of a gap there than most other offenses because they just got different guys involved. And we thought Gerald Everett would be somebody who could add a real dimension to this offense, and he's been pretty useless.
Did you think that? Is that a thing you thought?
I thought so. I mean, he's great after the catch. Like he's an athletic tight end weapon. I didn't think he'd come in and have 600 yards and 6 touchdowns or anything, but I thought as another threat at tight end, the Bears have just never really had that second reliable pass catching threat at tight end. I thought there was a lot of different ways you could get creative with him and open up the offense a little bit as a hybrid tight end receiver type who I think can make plays if you use him correctly.
A lot of Matt Space in Bears history. I get what you're saying.
Meliuna.
Yeah. What a pull. No, it's just, you talk about how like, well, he's later in the progression and pressure arrives and he's not a scramble drill guy. And I'm thinking, well, Justin Fields also took forever to get rid of the ball, scrambled a lot, invited pressure, and Cole Kmet ended up with like 700 yards last year. So it feels like the difference is probably more the Shane Waldron thing than it is the tight end's like third or fourth in the progression thing.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment there. It felt like last year it hit Cole Kmet up the seam quite a bit more, and we haven't really seen him running vertically in that way. And we also haven't seen the offense really emphasize that. I mean, these McVay systems like to break a lot more to the outside there in a lot of ways, and that's just not really where the tight end is going to thrive there. I'm just surprised he hasn't been more of the check down option as often. Like it ends up going to running backs a lot more, and it doesn't seem like he's been something they've gone to that much. And maybe because Caleb hasn't checked down a ton either, and he hasn't had as many opportunities there.
All right, let's talk about the offensive line. This was, believe it or not, one of the elements people were talking about when they were discussing how great it would be for a number one overall pick to land here. Not that it was a strength, but it wasn't as much of a weakness as it was 2-3 years ago. And that's nice, right? You've got a right tackle that people like. and a left tackle that people were surprised by in a good way, and some guys. Tevin Jenkins stuff was resolved. He's a guard now. Everyone's happy. What's going on?
Yeah, I would say at least in on the Locked On Bears podcast, of course.
Plug.
There have always been concerns about this offensive line, right? I mean, it wasn't as though like he's going to come in and have a great offensive line. It was like they got all these great weapons, and the offensive line
is fine,
good enough, maybe, hopefully. But it's the biggest stain. Well, I would say the biggest stain on Ryan Poles as a general manager, but the Chase Claypool trade is probably in there. But like, it's the biggest lingering stain that has not been unstained, has not been removed with one of those.
Not been OxyCleaned.
Yes, exactly. Especially because Ryan Poles is a former offensive lineman himself, and it's like, can this guy evaluate offensive line and value offensive line? Yeah. So the idea was, all right, Darnell Wright takes a big step in year 2 because he's a top 10 pick, and you expect him to be, one of the better offensive tackles in the NFL. Braxton Jones at left tackle. Year 3, like he'd taken a step forward from year 1 to year 2. You kind of thought, okay, like year 3, he might not be a top 5 left tackle, but if he can be at least like league average, you should be fine there. Like if Braxton Jones is your worst offensive lineman, you're in a pretty good spot. So okay, and then Tevin Jenkins, when he's healthy, has played some really, really high level guard. He just still can't stay healthy, and that's been the story of his whole career. But like, if he could just stay healthy, they're going to have a good season. And then, okay, right guard was supposed to be Nate Davis, their big free agent signing from a couple years ago, who
can we talk about that for just like a second? Like, yeah. Whoever thought Nate Davis was good?
He had some moments in Tennessee.
I saw that, that's not the same as being good.
Correct. I come back to the Ryan Poles flaw here. And the coaching staff was so stuck on Nate Davis for so long. They were going to give him every opportunity to play and to fail. But it became pretty apparent that like he doesn't love practicing and maybe doesn't love the game of football that much. But yeah, like they're like last year, their assistant offensive line coach had been an assistant offensive line coach in Tennessee. And this year, their assistant offensive line coach was also a former assistant offensive line coach in Tennessee. Like they brought in Nate Davis as coaches to try and be like, hey, bud, like, can we get over here? And just
we got both of your dads here, man. Come on.
Yeah, it's like a kid. It's like, hey, mommy and daddy are here, so now everything's okay, right? And it's like, no, not the case. And like he also, like last year, he dealt with I don't remember the details, but there was a death in the family that he missed a game, and like he's dealt with some actual personal off-field stuff that have also affected his play. So I try not to unilaterally, but at the same time, like it's been an abject disaster, and the Bears, to their credit at least,
I try not to shun him, but it's been a disaster.
I have empathy for him, but also like, come on, man, like the empathy only goes so far when there's more, there's stuff that's within his control that has not been handled well from his end. And so to the Bears' credit, though, they admitted their mistake finally and just straight up cut him mid-season, despite having a bunch of injuries on the interior of this offensive line, where they're going to most likely start their third string left guard in place of Tevin Jenkins and in place of Ryan Bates, which will be Jake Curhan, former Seattle Seahawks right tackle.
Curhan. Wait, so it's not hometown guy, Doug Kramer?
No. No. There was a game where Kramer came in at left guard because he was the only option they had there. But last week, when Jenkins was hurt and Ryan Bates got hurt, Curhan was the one who came in and actually played pretty well for a third string left guard coming in there. They don't actually trust Doug Kramer very much. He's just like by default the guy who's here healthy and can kind of play guard and center, but instead we'll just hand him the ball at fullback on the goal line so he can fumble it.
I actually did forget about that.
And they had the gall to run that same formation against the Packers and put him back in at fullback at the goal line. And we're all like, oh, no. They didn't hand it off to him, but I thought for sure Matt Eberflus was going to give Shane Waldron just a giant middle finger by handing it to Doug Kramer again.
Yeah, okay, but if it worked, that would be the funniest thing of all time. That would have been incredible.
Yeah, Matt Eberflus has a chance to do the funniest thing ever. Right?
So, Darnell Wright, is he good?
I don't know. I can't feel disappointed. Like the fact that answer is I don't know. Like he's not bad, but he's not where I want a top 10 pick at right tackle to be halfway through his second season. Like I struggle with this because it's like, you want to be patient with any young player, and halfway through his second season is not the final product of what Darnell Wright's going to be. And we kind of thought Darnell Wright was a little bit more of a project pick than some of the other tackles picked around him. Like not that he was a total project, but just needed more cleaning up, was more physical tools than perfect technique early on. And so, there should be a little bit of a longer runway of patience there for him compared to a tackle prospect who might be a little bit more of a clean prospect coming out. And yet I don't feel like I'm seeing a lot of the progress there. And that feels like a theme across this offensive line where you haven't really seen young players take big steps forward. And yet they continue to not only retain, but promote their offensive line coach, despite not much evidence that he's making a positive impact on just about anybody.
So that was the Bears offense. Great. Fantastic. So the last couple of times I've talked to, and mind you, I talked about the Colts and the Jaguars. So not offensive, especially under Flacco, not offensive juggernauts. The podcast hosts were not particularly optimistic about the offense against the Vikings defense. I believe between the two of them collectively, they scored 1 touchdown in those 2 games. Are the Bears going to get a touchdown in this game?
It's hard to trust that because they couldn't get a touchdown against the Patriots or the Cardinals. But the offense took enough of a turn against Green Bay where, like, I think going in the Green Bay game, it was like, okay, this offense scored 3 points on the Patriots. They're not going to get anything on the Packers. And they put up 19 and were in a position to win that game. So it's like, okay, have they figured something out? But it has felt to me all season like the weakness on this Bears offense, or I guess the formula that defenses have figured out against them, especially the starting with the Commanders and then the Cardinals and Patriots did the same thing, like stunt, blitz, and sim pressure the heck out of them. This offensive line can't figure that out. And this quarterback has had some trouble figuring out. Maybe this offensive coordinator has had some trouble figuring all of that out. And so that was working. But now, hey, new offensive coordinator, they seem to have some better answers for it against Green Bay. So that was sort of the appetizer. And now here's Brian Flores, Mr. Sim Pressure and Blitz. Let's see what you learned. Let's see if you actually have made some progress here. So it wouldn't surprise me if the Bears got a touchdown in this game, but I think it's going to be a struggle, and I think it's going to be low scoring, and I think the Vikings are going to challenge them in ways that are a little bit beyond what they're ready for right now. And generally, it's 10 points, it's 9 points, it's 13 points is kind of what I'm expecting in that range. All
right, so now to the good news. This is going to be fun. We're going to talk about the Bears defense. They're good as hell, right? This is a pretty good. This is a pretty good team.
I think the cracks are starting to show a little bit. Like there's still a good defense, but I'm kind of looking around wondering like if the dam's going to burst in one of these games where they just get gashed.
Okay, I do want to talk about that particular feeling that you have because I find that interesting, but I do want to add this. Halfway through, or I guess a quarter way through the season, halfway through the games that we've seen thus far, the Bears were a top 5 defense in EPA per play. Now they are 8th in EPA per play. So the Vikings remain at the top. The Lions have moved into the top 5. They're number 2. The Broncos have moved into the top 5. They're 3. The Chargers have taken a meteoric fall from 2nd to 4th. And the Texans have nudged their way into 5th. So the Bears no longer a top 5 defense in EPA per play. Now, given that context, can you kind of explain why you think the bottom's going to fall out of this group?
Yeah, and I don't know that the bottom's going to fall out entirely, and they're just going to be a bad defense for a big.
They're going to be awful. That's what you said.
Just feels like there's going to be a game where they give up 35, and you're like, "What the hell happened to the Bears defense?" And then, of course, they'll bounce back, and not every offense is going to be like. It just feels like, Ben Johnson's not the right one because they've typically done really well against the Lions offense, but like it feels like they'll play us like Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers or something will just figure something out and gash these guys, and they're gonna have to come back to the drawing board a little bit. Because so first of all, their run defense has been pretty bad all season. That's been kind of a known issue. But
we should have the 14th. What are you talking about?
Bad relative to the rest of their defense. Like teams have been able to run the ball on them pretty easily through a lot of the season. You're going to be like Aaron Jones should be able to get some stuff going in this game. Like the Packers did.
Yeah, okay, but it is a Kevin O'Connell offense. Like they're going to air it. Like, yeah, Aaron Jones might crack 100, but they're going to air it out.
Yeah, but like, I mean, Ramondre Stevenson and the Patriots had a pretty good game.
Okay, yeah, that was very stupid. I agree. Yeah.
James Conner demolished this. I mean, they could not stop him at all in the Cardinals game. I mean, he's a good running back, but like still, they just had no answers for him. I think the loss of Andrew Billings at nose tackle has been a big gap there. And I just think generally the linebackers, Edwards and Edmonds, are just kind of a little inconsistent in terms of fitting runs. They'll overrun it sometimes and just get too aggressive and not just settle down, guys. The ball carrier will be coming to you. Just get there. But and then they're a lot lighter on the edges than they were last year as well. And I think that's all kind of contributed to just a less than stellar running game. They're going to get gash in that regard. And then just overall, they give up a lot of yards. Like it can be too often this season. It feels a little too easy that the other offense is just marching down the field on them. And then the defense has an uncanny ability to generate a turnover or two that completely undoes whatever the offense had done up to that point. And those are so big in the EPA swings as well that make a big difference in a lot of the metrics. And it keeps them having a low points per game total. But it's like, yes, yards don't win football games, but you feel like, man, eventually the turnover variance is going to slow down and they're going to be a little bit less lucky. And we've seen it a little bit more the last couple of weeks. They didn't have one against Washington. They've only had one in each of the last two games after you were getting 2 to 3 a game pretty much all season, where it's like, just give the offense a bunch of extra chances and maybe you can win one of these games. But when the defense stops giving you that and they're just giving up some points instead, it's like at some point something's going to give here. That the pass rush is slowing down. The coverage is just a little bit less tight as they get more injured on the back end. And it just feels like it's slowly withering a little bit. I'm worried that it's going to break through, but I don't think it's going to, permanently collapse. There's just going to be a moment where it's like, this is toast right now and they need to get healthy and kind of regroup a little bit here.
This is why I love having nerds on. I feel like a lot of times a turnover dependent defense is just like, yeah, these guys, they love to get the ball, right? they know exactly where to find the ball. Yeah. Nerds are always more pessimistic. That's why they're better podcast interviews.
I think. I don't know.
No, go after yourself. Let's talk about the pass rush. So they traded for Darrell Taylor. They traded for Montez Sweat a bit ago. They signed Demarcus Walker in free agency, and wonder of wonders, they have a draft pick there too, Austin Booker. What's up? Yeah,
pass rush was the concern on this defense coming into the season. Again, not that they would be terrible, but like the back seven was and is the strength of this defense. And it's like, okay, it's kind of Montez Sweat and them boys. Like it's like, and and you were kind of looking for, you were kind of, I think Ryan Poles, much like the offensive line, was kind of taking this approach of like, I've got a bunch of young developing players here. And I think their defensive line coach is actually a pretty solid defensive line coach who has developed players with some track record here. And we've seen more progress in that group than the offensive line. But Ryan Poles says, I got these young guys, let's make them compete. And like, fingers crossed, 1 or 2 of them should emerge as a really good player. And then the other guys won't be, but that's okay, because we got our 1 or 2 that emerged from this group. And like, no one emerged from that on the offensive line. And on the defensive line, they've kind of taken turns having like, hey, this week Gervon Dexter's going to flash and have a couple sacks and make some big plays. And then the next game, oh, wow, Darrell Taylor has a strip sack. And it's a huge moment in a huge game. It's like, wow, he stepped up and made that play. And this week it's DeMarcus Walker's going to have that play. And for the first, 6-7 weeks of the season, they were getting enough of that where it's like, oh, this week was the Austin Booker game. And okay, as long as somebody steps up every single week, you've got yourself a little bit of a pass rush here. But the last couple of weeks, they haven't really had that like young player has those big flashy moments situation. And then Montez Sweat's, he gets his pressures and stuff every game, but he hasn't been making the huge impact plays. Like, he's not the problem, but you were kind of hoping that on those weeks where no one else is stepping up. Like, can this be the game that he makes that game-breaking play in the third quarter that's a strip sack for a touchdown or whatever it's going to be, or the big third down sack when the Vikings really need it or something? Like, those haven't quite been there. The consistent down-to-down pressure has been there. Like, that's what you're paying him for, you're getting, but you want like something else above and beyond if you really want to be that truly elite pass rusher, and that hasn't quite been there either. And so every single week it's like, okay, can somebody step up this week? We'll see. Tune in on Sunday to find out.
We'll see. Okay, so we mentioned the defensive tackles a little bit. You mentioned the Florida guy, Dexter. Florida, right? I didn't screw that up.
Yeah.
But there's also, I mean, I don't even know who Chris Williams is. There's also Zach Pickens, Byron Cowart, and Chris Williams, allegedly. Who is that?
He's one of those creative player generics in Madden, when you need to fill the last slot on your roster to meet your roster minimums, and they just kind of throw one in there where they don't even have a face picture. It's just like a black outline. That's Chris Williams.
Perfect. Okay, I just clicked on his name in Our Lads. I guess he's from Wagner, which that's nice.
So when they traded for Darrell Taylor, they also traded for Chris Williams from the Cleveland.
Wow. Yeah, that made a ton of news. You're right. So the defensive tackle is thin, is what I'm picking up, especially with Andrew Billings hurt.
So that's what you're picking up? Is that the defensive tackle spot's thin?
No, Jesus Christ. No, that's not. All right. It's been great, Lorin.
But yes, defensive tackle is thin. Because the whole thing is like, all right, like it's year 2. We need Gervon Dexter and Zach Pickens to be great. And it's like, most defensive tackles take like 3 or 4 years. I mean, look at Derek Brown in Carolina and a bunch of others. Like I went through this a lot during the offseason. Like year 2 is not usually when you see the big jump forward from defensive tackles. And so it always kind of felt like a slightly flawed plan on its premise. But I think from Ryan Pohl's perspective, it's like, listen, I can't fix everything all at once this offseason. So I got to leave a spot or two where we fingers crossed and hope that guys step up. And like there have been flashes, and I think they're making progress, just not the progress the Bears needed. And I think the Andrew Billings loss is significant. He was top 10 for sure, and I think top 5 in pass rush win rate among defensive tackles this season. Like he was legit.
Andrew Billings?
Andrew Billings dominating this year as a pass rusher. It was nuts. Like it was like Dexter Lawrence.
We talk about the same guy? What?
Guy.
Incredible. Okay, anyway, yeah. Classic, nose tackles dominating. Andrew Billings, Dexter Lawrence. Put Kenny Clark in there. Why not? What in the world are you talking? Really? Wow.
Yeah, it was. Again, it's still nose tackle snap, so it's not like he had some crazy number of pressures. It's just the rate. Whenever he was on the field, he was housing people and just moving bodies around. So like his losses almost hurt more in the pass rush department than the run defense department, but it's been pretty equal in both, I think.
Okay, great. Let's talk about the millionaires, the linebackers. Tremaine Edmonds, TJ Edwards, paid a ton of money in free agency a couple years ago. Surely they must be great.
No, I mean, they're good. I think they're good, but not like elite great. I think sometimes it's hard to isolate linebacker play from defensive line play, and when the defensive line is struggling a little bit, it's hard to get those guys in a vacuum and say like, okay, individually, it's the Roquan Smith conundrum, right? Where it's like, oh yeah, if you give Roquan Smith a great defensive line, he looks like a top 5 linebacker. And when offensive linemen are getting clean runs to the second level, he's terrible, and you're trading him instead of paying him because you just weren't giving him any space. Like I think Edmonds in particular, there's just kind of an up and down inconsistency with him where you get elite plays, and then sometimes it's just like, for whatever reason, he's just not dialed in, or he's just not seeing it correctly, and he's slow to react to stuff and try and get there. And you can kind of live with it because generally the good outweighs the bad there. And I mean, he's not a bad player by any means. He's just not, not totally dominant there. And I think the linebacker position in particular on this team is very like vibes dependent. Like energy matters a lot here, where it's like if things are cooking, they are dialed in and they're flying around the field, and they're like there's sort of the ripple effect of like if the momentum to break from the nerds here, if they've got momentum on the defense, you can really feel it in them. And like when things are going bad defensively,
all right,
that's where it breaks down.
So it's not that they're playing a bad offense; it's that they've got momentum and vibes.
Well, it's just like over the course of a game, right? Like if the offense makes a big play downfield, like you'll see the linebacker play get worse. And if then the defense makes a big sack or whatever on a previous play, then the linebacker play gets better. It's like they just seem to dial in a little bit more and they're just more focused. They're more locked in. They're more aggressive, whatever it is. And then I think when they're playing on their heels a little bit more, they're more hesitant and they're like kind of looking around and trying to figure out what's going on. And instead of just like really just playing by instincts and playing football there, it's a little too volatile in that way for my likes.
I hope your day gets worse. Let's talk about the secondary. So we've got Jalen Jones on IR. We've got Jaquan Brisker on IR. Still pretty good secondary though, right?
And Jaquan Brisker on IR for a concussion he suffered like 5 weeks ago. Like it's
screwed up.
It's his third concussion in 3 years, and he's on IR for this one. And the Bears, I mean, we don't really know much about that, but it feels like scary and like
that's terrifying.
Tua Tagovailoa conversations with Jaquan Brisker moving, like Tua didn't end up on IR for his concussion. Like this is, and he's coming into his contract year next year. So like, there's some real long-term questions about like, you give that guy a long-term extension this offseason or what? Anyway, their backup safety Elijah Hicks is also injured now. So they may be on third string safety Jonathan Owens starting in this game with Kevin Byard. They also have Tavarius Moore. I don't know which one they'll end up going with in this spot. We'll see. But yeah, they're banged up there. And then they've been rotating Tyreek Stevenson out at corner, not just for disciplinary reasons, but we mentioned Terrell Smith earlier. And I think, honestly, Terrell Smith's probably been playing better, but they obviously have incentive to want to make a second-round pick like Tyreek Stevenson work. And again, young player early in his career. Stevenson's always been a high highs and low lows kind of guy. He'll make a brilliant interception or a diving pass breakup where you're like, how did he make that play? That's crazy. And then he'll give up a 45-yard bomb down the sideline. You're like, how did he give up that play? That's crazy. Why wasn't he like? Why did he leave that guy so much space? And you're kind of hoping that as he matures, both football wise and hopefully emotional wise, that you cut down on some of the mistakes and still maintain a lot of the big plays and you get yourself a pretty decent corner. But the more that this struggle goes on and the better Terrell Smith plays, the more likely they could just make that change a little bit more finalized.
Cool. Love to see Gophers excelling against the Vikings. That's always wonderful. How's Simone Biles' husband? What's he up to?
Purely special teams player.
Classic.
Feels almost aggressive. Like I'm kind of surprised that they signed him to a not minimum contract this offseason. I think it was 2 years, $4 million or something along that lines. We're like, okay, not that they expect him to like compete to start, but like you're trying to upgrade your backup safety here by bringing him in. And then when your strong safety Jaquan Brisker goes down, Jonathan Owens is kind of a classic strong safety, and instead they put in Elijah Hicks, who's kind of a classic free safety, and said, screw it. We're just going to have him play deep, and we'll make Kevin Byard play a little bit differently than we had been asking him to play. And it was like, well, wasn't that why you signed Jonathan Owens here? But now Elijah Hicks is hurt. We'll see if he plays on Sunday, but I would think now you have to play Owens at some point here, right? I mean, to go to a guy off the practice squad would feel like another weird middle finger towards your prized backup safety signing this offseason.
Prized. Okay, so I'm looking at the practice squad right now. JT Woods and Adrian Cole, these do not seem like free safety types.
So Tavarius Moore, who's on their active roster, had been on the practice squad.
Okay.
Until Brisker went on injured reserve and they promoted Tavarius Moore. Tavarius Moore famously had an interception of Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl for the San Francisco 49ers.
Cool. So he's on the Bears now. It sounds like the 49ers did not super value that particular interception.
No, and he hasn't like started a game in the NFL in like 3 years. Like, don't get me wrong, he's not a good player,
but right.
It's one of those reclamation projects, right? Ooh, there's something there. We can get it back out of him. We've got the secrets here.
Yeah, David Tyree got cut in 2008 from the Giants. These things happen.
Yes, that's Tavarius Moore. He's the safety version of David Tyree. Correct. We may be Sunday. Like.
So, okay, Jalen Johnson still top whatever corners, top 3, top 2, top 1, question mark? He's good, right?
Yes, he is still really, really good. He did give up a big play against the Packers. It was kind of the first one all season. So
sliding to top 5. You hate to see it.
Well, that's why I talk about like cracks in this Bears defense, right? Like it's like, okay, you're on your third string strong safety. You're rotating your number 2 corner right now because that spot's inconsistent. Jalen Johnson just gave up the first big play of the year. The pass rush is slowing down. The run defense has been shaky all year. Like, boy, it just doesn't feel like this elite top 5 defense that it used to be. Doesn't mean it's a bad defense. They still only gave up 20 to Green Bay, but like it just feels like the shine is shining off, but maybe that's an anti-Matt Eberflus bias. I don't know. I'm trying not to let that influence. I'm trying to just watch the defense, and I still feel like I'm seeing cracks.
So a lot of times when I have guests on, I try to predict kind of which players they'll like the most or call underrated across the league, and often I'll agree with them. And I feel like Jalen Johnson is kind of under the radar for how talented he is. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think he's caught up quite a bit, but isn't totally there yet. I mean, he got that big contract, and I think that's when everyone was like, "Oh, okay, he's actually really good."
Right, but no one's talking about him this year.
Yeah, because there's so much more to talk about on this Bears defense, right? I mean, like on this Bears team as a whole, like he's storylines. Hey, Jalen Johnson's playing great. Yeah, that's 12th. You know, that doesn't even make it.
All right,
just so much other drama here that's like, yeah, that's sort of expected at this point. He just kind of quietly dominates on his side of the field or wherever he's lined up on any given play. So I think to Bears fans, he doesn't feel that underrated anymore. Because I mean, I don't think he's the number 1 cornerback in football, but he's definitely, top 5 up in there. But there's other guys that I think are a little bit flashier, and like Jalen Johnson still doesn't make a ton of turnovers, which is fine. Like you don't need him to, and turnover variance is crazy anyway. But like he's just a shutdown guy, but not like a big time playmaker. And I think that's sort of where he falls under the radar a little bit more, because you're not seeing a lot of like highlight reels of, hey, Jalen Johnson's 5 best coverage plays where he wasn't targeted on any of them. It's like, okay, let's just don't get the attention because he's just not getting thrown at that much.
Fair enough. So Justin Jefferson matchup, is that if he's not like the best corner and he's merely quite good, are you worried about the Justin Jefferson matchup with Jalen? Is it going to be a situation where they do the doubling with the second and third best defensive backs and then put Jalen Johnson on, I don't know, Jordan Addison or whoever? Or do they play sides? Like, what's the deal?
It's always hard to tell with Matt Eberflus. He tends.
You don't know if they play sides? Come on.
Oh, I'm sorry. How they're going to do it with Justin Jefferson in particular?
Okay, I was like, come on, man.
No. They swap back and forth quite a bit. But it was weird because initially they were playing sides and then they swapped back and forth. It is sometimes hard to tell with Matt Eberflus. For a while they were doing just sides, and then they're like, screw it, never mind. We're gonna move everybody around. Eberflus tends to be a guy who says like, I'm gonna play my defense my way, and then if I need to adjust in game, we'll get there. But I think he's gonna come out saying, go ahead and put Justin Jefferson on Tyreek Stevenson. We'll see how that goes for a half, and then if that's not working, all right, then we'll start bracketing it differently, and we'll move Jalen Johnson and have him shadow coverage. Like I don't think that's going to be the plan from snap one, but it might be the plan after halftime. So it's hard to like sit here and say, yes, here's how Matt Eberflus handles great number 1 wide receivers like this. Like it doesn't tend to be that clear and obvious of a game plan strategy coming in. It's more of a like, okay, they'll adjust to it during the game once the Vikings reprove again for the 17th time that Justin Jefferson is great and that you do have to adjust a little bit more to him.
That sounds great. I love that. I love for the Bears to try it. Yeah, exactly. Torrey Taylor. So when he was drafted, I thought it was funny because he's a punter drafted in the 4th round. Now, the data does suggest that drafting a punter is a lot higher expected value than drafting a kicker. So it's not quite the same thing. But when I left, I had a bunch of Iowa fans tell me, hey, you got to watch out. This guy's a weapon. He's a real weapon. I'm like, come on. And he's like, no, I know what it means, what it sounds like from an Iowa guy saying a punter is a weapon. But, he's terrifying. He's going to be a huge asset for the Bears. It's going to cause problems. How's that looking?
I've developed a reputation in, Chicago Twitter online media people of kind of being a Torrey Taylor hater.
Torrey Taylor hater? Well, I didn't even know this. Yeah, please go on.
Hater only because I haven't crowned him king of Chicago and handed him the key to the city the way everyone else has. I was not a fan of the pick at the time. In the 4th round, you do not use a 4th round pick on a punter of any
little
kind.
High. Even
if he's the best punter in the NFL from day one, that's not worth a 4th round pick. I always came back to like, would you trade a 4th round pick right now for any punter in the league? And the answer is obviously no. So why would you draft one with a 4th round?
Clearly don't respect Tommy Townsend. What in the world?
See, you couldn't even get people to fully agree on which punter is the best punter in the NFL. I might go AJ Cole from the Raiders. But
actually, I might trade a 4th for AJ. That guy's good.
A 4th though? 4th round pick.
Okay, maybe not a
5th, but a 4th round pick for.
Yeah, but then you get him on the rookie contract. So
yes, saving that $15 million against the cap. Yes, finally sign offensive lineman now because we're not paying a punter. No, so like, but Tory Taylor, I mean, he is fun to watch as a punter. I have the reputation as a hater. He is fun to watch. He's got all the clubs in his golf bag. You know, he can drop it in and he can do all this stuff. And like, he's had the Bears Twitter account has put out multiple highlight reels of Tory Taylor's punts. Like that's how bad the offense has been and how much they want to love Tory Taylor.
Right. I was going to ask, like, is some of that just like, because I've seen team Twitter accounts go like kind of sicko mode on kickers after the Twitter accounts receive a bunch of abuse on draft day for the team having drafted a kicker. And then the Twitter accounts are like, all right, kicker highlights, F you. Is it like the same thing with Tory Taylor's punter where people were mad at them and so now they feel kind of obligated to just put together some punting highlights?
I think it's the opposite where everyone loves Tory Taylor in Chicago. And so
it's engagement bait. It's like people love okay.
What they want. Yes.
Okay, so I know PFF grades aren't like incredible in every respect, but I feel like it is meaningful that he is the 23rd ranked punter.
Yes, he is pretty darn close to average in any major punting category you could find. EPA per punt, yards per punt average, net punt, punts inside the 20, hang time. Like he's been pretty much an average punter this season, which is fine if he's not
below average in return percentage. I will say that is a lot of returns.
Yeah, because he's punting from his own end zone most of the time. You know, like area.
Oh, so now you're a Taylor apologist.
I just thought this guy is supposed to come in and lead the league in hang time and lead the league in distance and be this game-changing punter that's so worth a 4th round pick. When you look at I want to say it's the Cincinnati Bengals punter, Ryan Rehkow, Rehkow, undrafted rookie free agent this year, signed by the Bengals, has more yards per punt, has, I think, better hang, like is at or above Tory Taylor in almost every statistical category, at least when I looked like 3 or 4 weeks ago. And it's like you can get a punter undrafted every year that is performing at the exact same, if not better level than your 4th round pick punter. And I'm the asshole for saying it.
Ryan Rehkow, by the way, was identified by friend of the show who I've never been onto the show, Alex Katzen, as a gem of a punter. And anybody who ever brings up Ryan Rehkow is now just like a punting ball knower. So props. You've passed a hidden test you didn't know you were taking.
I want to Tory Taylor seems like a cool guy and I want to like him. And like I do. I mean, I'm, sure.
I mean, no, you're a hater. What are you talking about?
It's like, why are we worshiping a punter, man? Like an average punter. Like if he was truly great, like, sure, let's totally lean into like when the Seahawks punter, Michael Dickerson.
I'm not familiar with that team.
But you remember like when he was like all the rage for like in like 20.
Yeah, punt god. Yeah.
2016. Like I'm totally on board with like, hey, this punter is doing crazy stuff. Or Marquette King with the Broncos. I love that. I want to have a punter who's like cool and fun and great. Like I'm the first person who wants to be on this Tory Taylor train, and I'm like, he's got to earn it. He's got to earn my punting approval, and he just
right. Okay, super quick on the other special teams. That's just so funny, man. Super quick on the other special teamers. Cairo Santos, he's all right?
Yeah, I mean, he kicks a slightly low-angled ball as the Green Bay.
That seems to have come up. Yeah.
But Cairo Santos, like he is, I think from a Bears fan perspective, he's automatic from anything inside 40 yards, anything inside 50, you feel really good about. And then, 50 to 55, we're pushing it, and 55 plus, no way, not a chance. Like he's your classic, like weak, quote unquote, weak leg kicker, but really, really solid pretty much everywhere. And great Cairo Santos thing for you this week. The latest Bears player directly contradicts whatever Matt Eberflus said. Eberflus at his press conference one of the days this week was asked, hey, Cairo Santos always kicks his extra points from the right hash. And at the end of the Packers game, you handed the ball off and downed the ball intentionally on the left hash. Any regrets there? And he goes, no, we wanted the ball on the left hash. That's what we felt really comfortable with. And then literally 20 minutes later, Cairo Santos at his locker says, yeah, I wish that kick would have been from the right hash. Really, really like him better over there.
Incredible. Also, props to whoever asked that question. Do you know who that was?
He's all right.
I just want to know who asked the question.
No, I'm just kidding. I believe it was Nick Moriano of CHGO, and he's a young guy. He's about my age. He's a cool dude. No, I've met him a couple times. He's nice.
Okay, I will say I'm not crazy about the 4-letter sites. They're gonna have to prove it to me. Maybe it's because I don't like the stuff I'm seeing from DNVR, but
Again, I don't know if you want to get into serious sports media talk here. I keep wondering where the money's gonna keep. Like,
there's so much money in them. What in the world?
You got big investors, but like, are they generating enough revenue to sustain what they're doing right now? Because it's a lot of, YouTube views and stuff. But like, I don't know if that's enough to pay all the salaries they got. They got subscribers, but do they have enough subscribers to pay all their salaries? I just don't see like a lot of ad revenue coming in for them that would sustain. I know how much they're paying some of the people in my 4-letter market, and it's like that.
No. It's across because Philly and Phoenix, both them, Grapevine, the sports writers that were approached by them got paid a ton. I assume the same was true of DNVR. Now, I super want to have this conversation. So they have all kinds of investor money, it seems like.
Oh, big time. Yes. Millions, so which is great, but it feels like how many times have we seen this cycle where it's like new sports media company comes in, new sports media company gets a bunch of money and spends like crazy and looks like the coolest place to be, and everyone wants to go work for them, and everybody jumps on the ship, and then 3 years later, hey guys, where's that revenue we needed for those investments? Oh, we're not making that much. All right, cut everything and gut the whole organization, and a bunch of people lose their jobs and move on to the next new media place that gets a bunch of investment money. Yeah. And just cycle through it.
They peeled Adam away from the Athletics. Man, there's a lot going on. Okay, so they've got a subscription model, kind of looks like. I'm now at CHC because I'm so curious.
Yeah, so you become a diehard is what it's called, and you pay.
All right,
and then you get access to exclusive content and stuff. Which, like, if I don't know what their subscription numbers are, and if they have a bunch of those, then that can pay the bills. And I'm certainly rooting for. I mean, I like the guys that work for them. This is not a like hating on CHGO by any means. I'm just from a business standpoint, I'm wondering like
this is we're gonna clip out. We don't ever clip out portions of the podcast. For the first time, we're gonna do it, and it's gonna be you being a CHGO hater.
Yes, I'd love to make enemies with those guys. Absolutely. I want them to all keep their jobs and make as much money as they can and be successful for sure. I look at them like they better have a bunch of subscribers that I just don't see as visibly because they're all in their subscriber only areas on their site, and maybe that's bumping off and they got this model that's going to work. But part of the all city model is also like, is it Denver where they opened a restaurant, a sports bar?
That's yes. What? Yes.
That's part of the model though, right? They sell merch. They have physical spaces, sports bar, like they try and be more than just a media company right there, but they're a sports brand is the whole pitch.
That is so hard. It is so difficult to like run a successful merch store. And I mean, because we don't technically do it. Threadless does it for us. It's fake. It's print as you go for us, right? But that's not the same thing as what it sounds like they're attempting to do. And restaurants are famously difficult.
Yeah, totally. And then you add in, like the CHGO has Cole Kmet on a podcast. It's called The 85, which I'm assuming, right? They have to be paying him for that too.
Right. Players
famously aren't inexpensive to get on a podcast to host up and come in. He does weekly stuff on their show. Like, there's a lot of spend, and I keep hoping that they get enough revenue on the other side. just keeps adding to the expense list, and I don't see like the big giant revenue streams where it's like, oh yes, there's the cash cow that's really working for him.
Have you been approached?
No, I have not.
We'll fix
that's why I'm such a hater.
Screw those guys. Yeah. Cool. So if they can't find you at CHGO, where can people find you?
Yeah, of course. You can hear me 5 days a week on the Locked On Bears podcast on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can follow me on Twitter at Arif Hassan's favorite Twitter handle at CoxSports1. I always say Sports1, but with a C, because when most other people say it, it sounds like a sexual act. But I try and emphasize
it sounds like a great series of porn parodies for sure.
Cox Sports #1, and now on Blue Sky at Lorin Cox, LORINCOX.BSKY.social. But they'll get over that at some point, right? Like they're gonna drop that, and you can just be at Blue Sky at Lorin Cox, right?
I don't know that they will, because the verification system is built less on a verified check and more on your ability to create unique URLs. So I could be Arif at wideleft.football, and that would verify me as the guy who owns that website, which I think is a decent alternate system for verification that doesn't require like manual verification. But the alternative now then is everyone is .bsky.social until they're verified. So I don't think they're going to drop it. I think that's going to be the thing.
You know, I'm going to change my position on this then. Like, I prefer the social hierarchy cast of saying I'm better than you. You have the regular handle, and I've got the non-regular handle, and it's earned. It's not just bought, but it's earned.
It's earned.
Yes. I can't just buy a blue check mark on Blue Sky. I have to earn it with a website because I'm better than you. That's perfect.
Love it. All right.
You have to have .bsky.social. Oh, I'm so sorry. That sucks. Oh, well, maybe someday you can get your own website like me and have your own custom Blue Sky handle.
You're cooking. Oh my gosh. Do you put your work anywhere? Like, that's what I was really asking. It's like, do you put your work out anywhere? Locked On Bears podcast, anywhere else?
I mean, it goes on the YouTube and the podcast feed, and I don't know. Like, I don't tweet it. Like,
wow. Okay.
You know, whatever.
Follow Lorin Cox, lorincox.bsky.social. Currently has a poverty handle over at Blue Sky, but I do too. It's fine. Thanks, man. Thanks for coming on.
Of course. Thanks for having me. I don't know. I always kind of leave going like, thanks for you're welcome for being here, I guess. I don't know if thanks for having me. No, it was
no, that's the attitude I want to make sure the guests leave with. All right, man. Have a good one.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to the mailbag. And the first question is from Damar, and this seems appropriate considering today. For Arif's Conspiracy Corner, not that part, but how much do the elements factor into games? The Vikings always seem to struggle in outside stadiums compared to domes, at least from what I've seen. Is there a way to combat this in any way? Say a weather machine that would make it beneficial, or make it more beneficial whenever the Vikings play outside? Or maybe crafting a danger room to simulate the toughest elements, especially the cold, considering Chicago and Green Bay?
Incredible. Okay, so first, I wanted to do some research on whether or not the Vikings were actually worse outside. And the first thing you want to eliminate as a factor is home field effects. So I only looked at away games when the Vikings were, outside, and then also when the Vikings were in the dome. So in the Kevin O'Connell era, there hasn't been, a ton of, there's not a large sample size, right? There haven't been that many games where they've played an away game that were domed. And so the vast majority of, so it's always going to be a slight majority of like whatever your home stadium is, but the vast majority of their away games have been outside, and the vast majority of their dome games have been at home. But I was able to find a couple that were in domes and compare them to each other. So first, I want to point out the Vikings, like 10 best away different, or it looks like 8 best point differentials on the road all occurred outside. And in fact, if you look at the average point differential for away games in the Kevin O'Connell era, when it's in a dome, it's minus 3.7. When it's outside, it's plus 2.9. So they actually historically perform better outside than in a dome in the Kevin O'Connell era on away games. mind you, the two of like the, was it 5 dome games that they've played on away have been against the Lions, both games of which they lost, right? One of them is against the Rams, which is this year. These are like good teams, right? Like that's where these losses come from, but they have beaten good teams away, right? Like the 22 Miami Dolphins, presumably, if we consider the Green Bay Packers to be a good team, the 23 Green Bay Packers, they've won outside against good teams. The Buffalo Bills, pretty good example of an away team in the elements that they won. That was an overtime game, but they beat them, right? So I don't actually think that there is that much of a dome versus outside effect. Like I think that we know that playing outside has an impact, but it seems like that impact doesn't extend beyond what's typically home field advantage. So it doesn't really concern me too much. Yeah, how would we deal with it though? I like the danger room idea a lot. That sounds like very stupidly expensive, but it's multi-purpose, right? You could train superheroes in it, so like the Wilfs would like rent out their facility to like your local Justice League or whatever, right? That feels like that's a good source of income for the Vikings.
Plus, I mean, the Vikings themselves have been referred to as having like the best facilities in the entire league. So
plus they already have the technology because they've already got the cryo chambers, right? That technology in the danger room.
Exactly. Let's go to the handsome Mr. Ben Greenhagen, who asks...
Hold on. Did we add that, or did
Well, you have called him that before.
Right, no, so I know. I just want to make sure. Okay, so he submitted a question as Ben Greenhagen.
Yes.
And then you, in the mailbag, added the handsome in front of it.
Yes.
Okay, great. Excellent. I just don't want him to get too uppity about it. If he's calling himself that, that's a lot.
Well, that is an issue. You're not allowed to give yourself a nickname. That's guy code guy rule number 1.
Right, exactly. So I'm cool. Yeah, keep going. I'm cool with this.
All right. The handsome Ben Greenhagen asks, if I've learned anything from years of Norse Code podcasts, it's that the Vikings' success at Soldier Field comes down to one factor: all pro performances from DJ Wanham. Who is best positioned to be the Vikings' new Earth sign talisman?
You leave it to the astronomer to use the word Earth sign to describe bear. That's so appropriate. Okay. Ben Greenhagen, whom we've doxed. I mean, it has to be Pat Jones, right? Like, I can't imagine a more DJ Wanham successor guy on the roster than him. Been around for a while, perpetual backup, has gotten a bunch of unblocked sacks. Now, Pat Jones is playing well this year. He's just coming off of a game where both of the sacks that he produced were the product of him like being blocked by a tackle or a guard. It's actually, the first one was a tackle, the second one was a guard. So he's not just getting unblocked sacks or anything like that. So I don't want to diminish, but he also does have a history of getting unblocked sacks, not quite DJ Wanham-esque, but it's still there, and he has the potential to do it. So I think that the answer has to be Patrick Jones II.
Next question is going to be from Will, who asks, what do the Vikings need to do to win the game, but also make sure that Matt Eberflus looks good enough so that he doesn't get fired?
I like this. I think it has to be a special teams play. And in particular, it's either a special teams play, like just what happened against the Packers with the blocked kick, or what happened prior to that against Washington, where it's not a special teams play, but it's like just one player just goofing off is the reason. Now, mind you, we can't have it. That can't be too much of it, because if you have multiple players goofing off, that does become a coaching issue and not a player issue. So it has to be kind of like, oh, this is clearly not a coach issue. This is a player issue. Maybe if it's the same player, right? So if multiple players are doing it, no. But if Tyreek Stevenson just kind of loafs around, just makes fun of people, doesn't realize the play is happening, and that's how the Vikings win, I think that keeps Matt, because they'll just cut him then, right? And now you've got your scapegoat, you're good. That'll keep the job for Matt Eberflus. I'm not sure that there's much that he can do to keep his job by the end of the season. The Bears, whenever people talk about firing coaches midway through the season, remember this conversation a lot back when the Bears had to fire half their staff. The Bears fans will remind you, and in this case, normally, like when people, like when I say blank fans flooded my mentions, it's usually unhelpful and I don't like it. This is slightly annoying, but it is at least helpful. Bears fans will remind you that they do not have a history of firing coaches midseason, even when it's extremely obvious that coach is headed out the door, which fair enough. Thank you for reminding us a bunch of times last year. So I want to put that out there that he's probably going to keep his job no matter what to the end of the season, and there's not much you can do to keep his job after the season is over. Of course, now that I've said that, they're just going to fire him tomorrow or something. But I think that Tyreek Stevenson screwing up, a special teams play of some sort. I think that's kind of where it is. It has to be a close game, because if you get blown out, that's it, right? It has to be a close game. But if it's a close game, it having it rely on a single moment does make it feel like more coach related. So if it's not a special team screw up or a Tyreek Stevenson screw up, it just has to be like a failed 2-minute drive from the Bears, I think is the best way to do it. The Bears are down by 2 scores. They, in the final 3 minutes, get the first of the 2 scores they need. And then, they successfully, force the Vikings to punt. And then there's just like not enough time. There's like 13 seconds left. So they can't get that 2-minute drill going. And that's kind of the most neutral, close game situation where you're probably not going to end up blaming the coach. Personally, I wouldn't like that because that's stressful. But that's probably the best way to make sure that Matt Eberflus is closer to keeping his job.
Let's go to our next question, which is from Italian Charlie Kelly.
What?
That's what his name said. With us needing an established quarterback starter who won't push JJ for the starting job, but has been around for a while and was a number 1 first-round pick, or rather was a first-round pick, who has shown they can perform in a tough market. Why is New York quarterback Daniel Jones the likely backup next year?
Backup at what position? We'll talk about that a little bit more in a second, but okay, that's good. This is probably not a situation where the organization has failed the quarterback. If I'm being, because Kevin O'Connell was talking about how Darnold is good, and he's like, most of the time it's not the quarterbacks who fail the organization, it's the organization who fails the quarterbacks. And I'm not saying that Daniel Jones has had the best supporting cast or the best coaching. He clearly hasn't. But I don't think it's there. I don't think it's there. It'd be a funny backup, Aaron Rodgers. I don't want him on the team at all, but it is funny having him be a backup. Definitely don't want him on the team.
The dumb rumor about him being a backup or like trying to get over to Minnesota is just so stupid.
Extremely dumb rumor. Extremely dumb.
The situations are completely different. It's not a chance in hell. And I cannot imagine a situation where he would walk in and go, yes, I want to get, like, where he's just concerned about, like, oh, I'm here for money. Like, no, he's here there to start. Like, there's no question about it. He's not going to sign someplace to be a backup. He's going to do the Flacco thing, and he's going to get cut this year, and he's going to end up on, what's what I'm looking for? He's going to get cut this year, and then he's going to not do anything for training camp. Someone's going to get hurt week 1, and that'll be the job he takes. Like, I could see him doing the Flacco thing. Or just staying home and doing nothing.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think the Vikings will get Justin Fields. I think that's funny.
I'm just trying to envision a scenario where that happens.
Is it a 1-year deal with Pittsburgh? We gotta find out what his contract situation is, so that we can irresponsibly drum up rumors a couple weeks from now.
Exactly. Like, if it's a 3-year deal, that's obviously difficult. But I thought it was just like taking a flyer this year.
Okay, so Google hasn't updated its spot track cache because they're still talking about the 4-year. Okay, yeah. Okay. So his current contract is just a continuation of the contract that he has with the Bears. So there's only 1 year left on it. There is no 5th year option. So this is it. This is the end. So he's a free agent next year. And he's not like good, but I didn't think Sam Darnold was good, right? And he was winning. And we all know how much quarterback wins matter when evaluating prospects. So Yeah, I think just like, especially after all of and I'm not going to exclude myself from this particular, but like all of the Vikings should have drafted Justin Fields stuff, which again, I was very much team. They should have drafted Justin Fields. They should have traded up and drafted Justin Fields. Clearly wrong about that, but it would be funny if they did eventually end up with Justin Fields. So that to me is the answer to this one.
God, that is horrifying. No part of me wants to do that.
I don't know what you want me to say. He's a winner.
Well, he wasn't today. Dr. Tentacles asks, that's what it said also. It was asked last week what the Vikings can do to make Darnold's face mask more visible to referees. But I'd like to go in a different direction. Is there something the Vikings can do to make Addison more visible to Darnold?
So there are relatively strict rules on the clothing that players can wear, especially like on the helmet. So there's only a couple of approved face mask colors. So that's kind of difficult to figure out. There's only so far afield you can be from team colors with your gear that are not white or black before. So like the great thing about the Vikings is that because, gold is one of the colors, you can wear a lot of yellow. Yellow is a high contrast color. In fact, the easiest color pattern to see is yellow on black, followed by black on yellow. That's even easier than white on yellow, or white on black, sorry. So you can kind of turn that up a little bit and make it as neon yellow as possible, probably without violating any NFL guidelines, and probably toe the line a little bit, so long as it doesn't start turning like kind of greenish, and then you're kind of in trouble. So I think neon yellow gloves, neon yellow shooter sleeve, I think, neon yellow shoes and socks, and he'll be pretty visible, I think.
You're just trying to get him in like as much of a high visibility like vest as possible.
Right. Yeah. No, I think essentially, yeah, a high vis vest, but one that doesn't have camo because that would not help, and also violate league rules, or is orange. Right. So all of that, like a construction high vis vest, and then the net benefit of this is, aside from Sam Darnold being able to see him, in theory, refs will do a better job of being able to figure out if someone is pulling at his jersey or something like that, or holding his arm because it's got a bright neon yellow shooter sleeve on it.
This is an interesting theory. I don't think any of this is going to work. From I Hate Carmel, Indiana, which, by the way, that is actually, according to them, that is what they were trying to say. They're just not allowed to have.
I feel so good for having figured that out.
Yeah, they apparently can't have a comma in their username.
No, that makes sense. So the only reason I even knew about Carmel at all, because it was just I Hate Carmel and it was like Carmel, Indiana. The only reason I knew about Carmel at all is because there was like a viral TikTok of their insane high school going around. Like they just broke ground a new high school, and one of these, he's just a child. I shouldn't make fun of him. One of these kids that reminds me of the kids I hated in high school.
There you go.
He might be a fine person, okay? But he's giving off vibes that did not, is showing off the school that has like 3 gyms and a multi-story library and movie studio. I don't remember everything. I just remember like thinking either no school should be like this or all schools should be like this was like what my brain did. So
like Red River with funding.
Yeah. God, Red River would have loved. Oh, Jesus. They love the theater stuff over there. Yeah. So that's the only point. And I was like, I could see why somebody would hate this random city in Indiana.
Yeah.
Anyway, the question.
So the question is, do we think the Bears will run some designed rollouts to combat Flores' blitzes? We haven't seen many from opponents thus far this season. Is that why the Vikings scheme already accounts for that? Also, for Arif and James' regional theater corner, after Paul Allen's premiere at the Guthrie this summer as the narrator in Little Shop of Horrors, which Minnesota sports personality will make the next stunt cast cameo appearance, and in what production?
Okay, I will not be mean to Lindsay Young, who I love, but is not exactly tall. I will not call her Munchkin in Wicked. I will not do that. Okay, so Minnesota sports personality. I think. Well, Sam Ekstrom has like a really great ability to do impressions of other broadcasters. I don't know if you've ever heard it, James.
But I've listened to the show enough where I've heard some, yes.
It's incredible. So I think being able to do that so if a show just needs a Joe Buck or a Troy Aikman for whatever reason, I assume this is going to be a football related show. But Sam would be perfect to cast for that. Otherwise, Luke Braun in any number of criminal roles.
Actually, I could see, you know what, Luke Braun as the narrator, the narrator in Rocky Horror Picture Show. I could see.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that follows. Anyway, the actual football question, design rollouts. I think the answer has in part to do with the fact that the Viking scheme does have a way to account for that. They do a really good job. I mean, because they're so cued into what's happening in the flats, they've got, a lot of answers because they've got, the corners in the four high shell, the corners have their eyes on the flat and stuff like that. It's really difficult to widen out against the Vikings because of how keyed in they are to those areas of the field on either side of the field. Especially because a lot of the drops will occur, like when they do rush for, a lot of those drops will occur on the field side or the boundary side. And that is where typically you want your rollouts to be, because otherwise you just don't have as much space to roll out. And that creates a lot of problems if you're trying to scramble, because now your coverage defender, who is a pure pass rusher, really can turn into a pass rusher. So I think that has something to do with it. I think also the fact that like teams don't have a lot of opportunities to run play action against the Vikings because they've been behind for much of the game in most of these games also makes it difficult to like effectively do a rollout. So I think there's like a couple of elements involved here. I think the fact that, Grenard is a pretty good athlete, that Dallas Turner's an outstanding athlete, that probably matters too. And then the fact that you've got the safeties close to the line of scrimmage also probably impacts the way the team's game plan in this way.
Don from Ohio asks a legitimate question. Is Rex Grossman the greatest quarterback this century? Now, just a reminder.
For the Bears. For the
Bears. Apologies. Yes, for the Bears. And this is a reminder that the Bears did go to a Super Bowl this century.
Yeah, in 2006, in the rain against Peyton Manning.
Yep. Did not go well for them.
No, despite some assistance from Devin Hester. Okay, the answer is not yes, but it's frustrating that it could be. It's not good. It's still Jay Cutler, who may be the best quarterback the Bears have had since like the 1960s. It's a bad look. It's a bad history of quarterbacks. It's not quite Cleveland Browns, whatever, right? But it is not great. Maybe if they had built around Kyle Orton better, who's to say?
It's the Browns, but with consistency.
Yeah, it's very I think it's Jay Cutler, who I had overrated as a quarterback while he was playing, but still think that he was largely underrated by the league. I think that is true. He was not extremely good, but he was good. The Bears just didn't really have much of an offensive line while he was playing, or after, or before. That is supposed to be a pretty problem with him.
Pretty.
Yeah, that's not good.
That tends to cover a lot. And you could make the argument that Jay Cutler never got them past the NFC Championship game. Jay Cutler took him. Well, I don't know if he would say took himself out, but
he did not take himself out of that game.
He did not take himself out of that game. He just sat on the sidelines, standing and pouting, as he was not
right. So the one issue with that is he did not look enough like he was in pain. Was the problem? He just didn't look like he was in pain. But it turns out he was in tremendous pain, and he just kind of doesn't react to stuff,
which
we already kind of knew about him.
Yeah. He just disassociated thinking about how much he wanted to smoke.
Yeah, which I'm pretty sympathetic to that, just kind of generally. But yeah, so it turns out you like a grade 3 tear in one of his ligaments, and which is a pretty sick, like, Jesus Christ, man, how are you standing? But yeah, he looked chill, and so a bunch of people got mad, including former players, got mad. They're like, why aren't you trying to get back in the game? And apparently he did try to get back in the game, but they wouldn't let him. And what's he going to do? Is he going to force the issue? Like, that's kind of it. So that didn't help. But, and the way the third quarterback rule worked, like, I think he couldn't get back in the game legally after they put the third, like, because what was it? Caleb Haney and Todd, what's his name, right?
Bears. It was because it was the Bears Packers NFC Championship game. So that would have been 2011, and the quarterbacks for the Bears that game. It was Caleb Haney and Todd Collins.
Wow, I can't believe I remember that.
Todd Collins 0 for 4.
Wait, and then they immediately put Haney in after that, or was Todd Collins the third? Oh, it looks like Todd Collins might have been the third quarterback.
Yeah.
Yeah, because once you put the third quarterback in there, based on the rules that they had at the time, because he was the emergency quarterback. No, the third quarterback was Caleb Haney. They just pulled Todd Collins super quickly.
Mm-hmm. Like, no, we're done here.
Amazing. Yeah, then you couldn't put Jay Cutler back in the game, I think is the rule, once you put Caleb Haney in there, which is like a really bad set of sentences to say. So yeah, I think the answer is Jay Cutler. The Vikings have had several quarterbacks this century that are better than Jay Cutler. That's like not a great place to be.
Boy, just looking at the box score for this one, the rushers this game: Matt Forte, Jay Cutler, Caleb Haney, Earl Bennett, and Chester Taylor.
Ooh, wow, that's
3 carries, 2 yards, 1 touchdown.
1 touchdown.
That's Chester, all right.
All right, Chester, let's go.
B Percenter asks, is there a rule prohibiting how far back a kicker can be on long snaps? If part of the issue with 60-plus yard kicks is angle of trajectory, why don't more teams just line up the holder and kicker a few yards further back? Or am I just crazy?
So there's no rule that a dog can't play football. Now, there's no rule on this one. So in order for you to be in a field goal kicking formation, or place kicking is what they call it, because it's also true for the extra point attempt. Place kicking formation, the holder has to be at least 7 yards away from the line of scrimmage. But there's no maximum. It's just at least 7. And that's how they've been practicing, 7 and then sometimes 8. That's just kind of how that works. But there's no rule on that. The problem is long snapping is like insanely difficult. There was one time when we were all for whatever the predecessor to the Minnesota Football Party was, the Machine. Yeah. One of our bits was that we were all long snapping on like the roof of whatever building we were on. And we all were trying to do it accurately and at a distance. And we could all do it. And Sam Ekstrom said, it seems like long snapping is not particularly difficult on the video. And I wanted to, I was so upset about this because that's so not true, because we all sucked. Not only was it that we took several tries to get it right, all of us would have been committing false starts. I think that's the one thing that we didn't, or that no one had realized, is that the way that we were doing these long snaps, because it has to be one fluid, smooth motion, or we have screwed the holder and the kicker. It's really difficult to get it right. And to do it consistently and accurately at that distance is really tough. Being able to hit a target from 21 feet away when you're long snapping is not easy. It just is not. And so to move that to 8, which a lot of them have done, that's really difficult. To move it even more than that, I think you're asking way too much of a long snapper. I do like the way that you thought this through, though, because the angle of trajectory is one of the biggest challenges to long distance field goals. It's usually not the first thing limiting you is usually not the amount of power that you need, although that is an issue, right? Or the increasing need for accuracy, right? Because the further away you are from the field goal, the less tolerance you have on the angle of your kick, because every slight change in degree, the further away you are leads to the ball going even further away from the field goal post. So those are both elements, and those are limitations. But if you watch like field goal practice before games, mind you, there's like a bunch of different things that it's not in games. There's less pressure. There's not a pass rush or kick rush. All of those, you don't have to adjust to the holder. But they regularly go over 65 yards in these pregame warm-up kicks. The primary thing is you have to get it over the line and then get it over people trying to block the kick. So I agree that is a good way to look at it. It is just, that's a lot. And it even gets to the point where they have, on a really well-oiled battery, they know the number of rotations the ball will take on an ideal long snap. Like, it is that precise sometimes because the timing has to be right, the target has to be right, and then how the holder grabs it and sticks it into the ground has to be right. And you'll see all the time holders will adjust because the rotation is 1/2 rotation off or something like that. So I'm not saying it's this precise every single time, but it's something that they think about and care about. Not only that, the further away you are, so let's say all of that is figured out, the rotation, the distance, the further away you are, the more the timing changes on the kick. And the timing matters a lot too. And it is easier for a kick rush to get into that position to block the kick if you have to wait half a beat before you can start your kick. So there's a lot of things here that are going to screw it up. And the timing on the kick is like one thing you really don't want to mess with for a couple of reasons, right? Both for the kicker's sake in terms of their accuracy and also for preventing the kick rush getting into position. Because if you wait like half a second, a lot more of those kicks are getting blocked from the side instead of up top.
Next question is from Delta BC Dad, who asks, question for Arif's actual football question corner. There's been a lot of hand-wringing about the Vikings' performance for most of the season, despite their excellent records. Yourself and the two Lukes have pushed back on this, pointing out that the Vikings have won in decisive fashion in most games. However, a lot of this discussion has been around how the defense is very good at punishing bad quarterbacks and has only been bested by 2 good quarterbacks. However, if the Vikings are going to make a deep run in the playoffs, they are unlikely to face more than 1 bad quarterback. Given the quality of quarterbacks improves dramatically in the postseason, to what extent can we expect the defense to perform against good quarterbacks versus what we've seen so far? Having a defense that is designed to be great against bad quarterbacks may not be effective against good quarterbacks, but may bode well for playoff implications. Is it possible that a lot of fans' consternation is centered on this?
I understand like where this is coming from, but I think you got to think about it in terms of like, if we had asked this question of like any other good team right now, because there's no undefeated team, right? The Chiefs lost last week. And you look at, the Detroit Lions, or I guess the Pittsburgh Steelers are 8-3, or the Baltimore Ravens, the Buffalo Bills, and you look at like how they've lost those games. Some of those games that they've lost, or a lot of those games they've lost, is, the defense isn't holding up, right? Is the defense holding up against a good team or a bad team? I think, like, so for example, the Lions started out kind of like a little bit less impressive, right? Because they started out going into overtime against the Rams, and then they lost to the Buccaneers, right? So that's Baker Mayfield. The Eagles have been I think they're on a 6-game winning streak. So people are kind of buying back into the Eagles after they fell off at the beginning of last season. But you take a look at their losses, and they lost to Washington, and I think we should probably say that's – oh, no, they didn't lose to Washington. They beat Washington. They lost to the Buccaneers, so Baker Mayfield again, and the Atlanta Falcons, so that's Kirk Cousins. You look at the Buffalo Bills, and you see that, like, this is largely a pretty good team that doesn't have receivers, now that they've got Amari Cooper, maybe. But a lot of people have been talking about how that defense is performing better than we thought. You take a look at their losses, it's to Lamar Jackson and CJ Stroud, right? a lot of these teams have had losses to worse quarterbacks. Now, if we head into the playoffs and we think about, would you rather be good against good quarterbacks or bad quarterbacks? I think abstractly you'd say good quarterbacks, right? Like obviously you'd rather be good against good quarterbacks because that's who you're going to play in the playoffs. But I think that having issues against bad quarterbacks translates across the stack, as it were. Like I think that speaks to problems that will persist. Whereas if you get beaten by a good quarterback, that doesn't mean you'll get beaten by a good quarterback again if you're really dunking on all these bad quarterbacks, right? So I think that I would be more confident in a team that only has lost to good teams than teams that have lost to a mixture of good, mediocre, and bad teams or bad quarterbacks, right? So like, yeah, obviously, having lost to Matthew Stafford and Jared Goff, you're concerned that, you're going to play them in the playoffs again and, they've kind of figured it out and you'd rather have a quarterback that didn't figure it out, like Will Levis do it, right? But I think I would be more concerned about the state of the Vikings if they had beaten the Lions and lost to the Titans than if they had, lost to the Lions and beaten the Titans, which is what happened. That suggests things further on down the line because you can translate performances against bad teams into, some level of data in how they'll perform in the future against good teams. So that's like the first thing is that none of these teams are undefeated, and a lot of the teams that have had losses have lost to worse teams than the Vikings, and that is actually a worse place to be, even if they've beaten some of the better teams that the Vikings have played, right? Like I would rather lose to Matthew Stafford and Jared Goff than, even Baker Mayfield, who's having a really good year, than like Baker Mayfield and Kirk Cousins, right? Like I think that that's the place that you would rather be. So that I think is the framework, right? After that, like I don't know that the defense is necessarily designed to be particularly good against, bad quarterbacks in ways that are exploitable by good quarterbacks, because they did take on like CJ Stroud, right? They did a pretty good job against CJ Stroud, right? They've done well against experienced quarterbacks like Joe Flacco, who I wouldn't argue is a good quarterback. But the reasons a good quarterback might beat this team, right, because of how complicated and crazy it is and how much they force these quick throws and how much you have to use your hot reads and stuff like that. Like the way that we describe how Jared Goff and Matthew Stafford beat the Vikings, and they did it in two different ways, is something that Joe Flacco would be able to replicate, but he couldn't do it, right? So I think that that really is more kind of looking for reasons to be upset about this team. The thing is, this is a great year to be pretty good, right? There's a lot of years where being pretty good isn't enough because there's too many great teams, and you might put the Lions in that conversation as like a great team right now, and I think that that's fair, but there just aren't that many great teams. There just aren't, right? I don't know that the Chiefs are, I don't know that the Ravens are, I don't know that the Bills are, right? Certainly, I don't think the Packers are. I don't think the Eagles are. I don't think Washington is. So if there's no great teams, this is a pretty good year to be a pretty good team, because now there's not really a buzzsaw you can run into, I think. So, yeah, obviously you have to pay attention to why you lost to Goff, why you lost to Stafford. But I think that is a much clearer signal that you can win these games going forward than having to pay attention to why you lost to Will Levis or Mac Jones, which those games were close, but that does nothing to do with the defense, I think. Yeah. So, yeah.
Also, question for Arif's parenting corner. My son Henry has recently started showing profound lapses in his judgment. On top of planning his Sundays around watching the Vikings games, I have found him listening to Question a Podcast before bed, notably Locked On Vikings and Norse Code. What kind of intervention should I take? Should I give him a Luke Braun mask? Hook him into Locked On Minnesota so he can also become a Wolves, Wild, Twins, and Lynx fan? That all depends. Are you able actually to watch any of those teams outside of the Vikings on cable?
It's a good question.
It's a bit challenging for us who live in the market. I can't imagine that it's easy in Canada to do that.
I don't have Bally Sports or Bally Sports North or whatever it's called this week. So I can't watch, I think, 3 of these teams?
It's like literally that? Why I stopped following the Wild. That and the playoff losses. But like I can handle those. But I couldn't watch the team. And the Twins too. Like it's been handed off so many times.
Yeah, I have been very ardently following the WNBA, right? People who've been listening over the summer know this. And I have watched more non-links. Well, there are more non-links games. That's not really fair. I've proportionally watched more games from other teams than I have the links because of this problem, because I have League Pass. And so I can watch any game for any team except the ones the links play in. And so I've watched a lot of Las Vegas. I've watched a lot of Phoenix. I've watched a lot of Connecticut. And I just haven't been able to watch as much of the links, which sucks because I would love to watch the links. So that's one. Two, I agree that listening to Locked On Vikings and Norse Code is worse than listening to the Joe Rogan Experience for your development as a moral being. That is rough, especially for a young impressionable child who should instead be listening to fake historians and pseudoscience and MRAs. I don't even know.
Just nothing but YouTube Shorts.
Yeah, exactly.
My son was watching one that started talking about flat Earth, and I damn near threw his phone across the room.
Ooh, boy, wow. Okay, that's a minefield.
I was, and he went, "No, I know it's not real," and I went,
"Don't care. You'll continue knowing it's not real. We're not watching this.
You'll remember this moment more than you will the fact it's not real."
Yeah. There's a bunch of great videos debunking all that stuff, though. I sometimes I just put them on while I'm working. It's like, I know the Earth is round, but it feels great hearing Professor Dave tell me that the world is round.
You're just looking for a type of security in this world, and you can't get that from many things other than this Professor Dave.
Yeah. So anyway, the intervention. So if watching the Vikings or the Twins or the Wolves, or I guess, okay, someone texted me today, the Wild are good ? Which sounds like an apocalyptic event. But I'm going to imagine that that's not going to hold up. So watching any of these teams, if that's not itself, besides the links, if that is not itself punishment enough or a deterrence enough, I think you may have lost your son. Poor Henry. You may be in a bad spot. If what these podcasts lead to, which is bad teams, doesn't stop him from listening to these podcasts, you might have to intervene with other podcasts. Heed the Call. We just had the producer of the Heed the Call podcast help us preview the Titans. That's a great podcast, right? The Mina Kimes Show featuring Lenny. That's a great podcast. The Ringer NFL podcast has Ben Solak on it, so not that one. But the Athletic NFL show, Robert Mays and Derek Klassen. Football, was it 301 with Charles McDonald and Nate Tice? So many other better podcasts that probably won't corrupt your kid. NFL Stock Exchange with Trevor Sikkema and Connor Rogers. Like those all seem like much more morally sound podcasts to get your son to listen to.
Yeah. So let's just go with that. Let's go to Patrick, who asks for Arif's car security corner.
Ah, Jesus.
I'm trying to sell my 2009 Subaru Impreza. Do you know of any security features that I can advertise for it? If it helps, it's currently in a garage. Is there some form of amulet or spell I can use to perform on it to help secure it for its new owner? By the way, we are going off the rails for the rest of this episode, and there will be some turkey stuff in it if you would like to hear a Arif rant.
Okay, so first of all, things I know about the 2009 Subaru Impreza. Are you sure it's Impreza? I asked before the show if it's pronounced Impreza or Impreza, and you said Impreza, and then I just Googled it. There actually is only one Z in it, and so now I'm not so sure that your pronunciation is correct.
You're going to start questioning my pronunciation after I nailed the French last episode?
Okay, that is a fair point, that you definitely said that question that was in French perfectly from your own microphone, for sure, that you definitely did that. But it's spelled differently than it is in the, so I'm just, anyway, I do know that the 2009 Subaru Impreza has an immobilizer system, which is the critical thing that the Hyundais and Kias from that era and then also 10 years later don't have, which prevents you from being able to hotwire the car. That is a really critical the key fob needs to be, or the key needs to be within a physical proximity to the car to provide an electronic signal to indicate that the key is nearby. So it's not just the turning and the impressions on the key that do it, but also like the actual physical proximity. So there's that. A lot of 2009 Subarus have like an anti-theft alarm. I don't know if yours does, but that's something. It may have a keyless entry system. I don't know. Maybe yours does. But there are upgrade kits that are purchasable over at various dealerships that you could advertise are available for it. I don't know if you've actually done that, but the immobilizer is the kind of the key thing. I wouldn't go out of my way advertising security features. That's like, from a sales perspective, you don't start with all the ways it can fail and how it stops those. You just start with all of the great, and when they ask about security, you can talk about the security features. But I wouldn't bring up the possibility that the car might not be secure. That feels like a sales kind of 101 thing to me.
Well, let's go to our next question, which is there we go, from Vignesh, who asks, for Arif's multiverse corner, what else would be happening in the NFL in the single timeline where Daniel Jones is discovered to be an all-pro caliber safety?
Okay, so for people who are unaware, Daniel Jones has been taking snaps. So after he got demoted to third-string quarterback, he's been taking snaps on the scout team at safety. Podcast legend and JMU alum, Ben DiNucci.
The one, the only, the man, the myth, the legend.
Yeah, nearly a national champion, Ben DiNucci.
The Ben DiNucci from the stinger on the outro of our show.
Okay, by the way, that is Ben DiNucci who says that. For anybody who's not familiar, was it Damien?
I believe it was Damien, yes.
Yeah, Damien paid Ben DiNucci a cameo, right, to just say the podcast stinger.
Yep.
And so we just have...
Friend of the show, despite the fact he's on more episodes than Dusty at this point, but he's never been on the microphone for us. So Ben DiNucci had an interesting take on this, because the tweet that came out was that the Giants had Daniel Jones playing scout team safety at one point during practice, according to local media on the scene. DiNucci said, quote, "I did this for 3 years. If you aren't QB1 or QB2, I promise you're playing scout safety. I'm willing to bet 75% of the QB3s right now are scout safeties and haven't touched a ball since training camp."
Okay, but you know what this means? This means that Trey Lance has been playing safety the whole time.
Yes, that is exactly what this means.
That's awesome. Like, that's all I need.
It's like you have all the evidence that you need. The conspiracy theory has been proven true.
Yeah, you can't. So we don't have camera on while we do the podcast because we're never going to turn these into YouTube shorts. But by the way, we get like YouTube comments now, which is great. Half of them are people who clearly find one thing someone said in the show and then just comment on that, acontextual to anything else that happened in the show. It's delightful.
Arif really enjoys it.
They're so funny because it's just like no one's heading over to Blue Sky, and it's like, okay, there was like 3 hours of show, and at the very end, I talked about Blue Sky. Like, that's the thing that you care? Okay, fine. It's amazing. Anyway, as I was saying, that Trey Lance has definitely played scout team safety. I was rocking back and forth in my chair in excitement. Like, you have no idea how awesome this is for me.
This is like the first time there was actual evidence that Trubisky couldn't throw left.
Yeah, and then the best part. Okay, I'm like my knees are up in the chair. I'm so happy about the whole, like, when the bits actualize and they become part of real world lore. I ascend. When Trubisky said unfortunately it was like a bad phone connection and it was like a phone interview because of COVID. But when Trubisky said, "I've got to do better working on throwing to the left," I lost my mind. I have a video of him saying it. It is so poor quality because the the quality that the Bears uploaded to the website, which I cannot believe they did, was awful because he is just on his phone doing this.
It's somehow worse than the All-22 of Soldier Field.
Shockingly, yeah. So anyway, the alternate reality where Daniel Jones is discovered to be an all-pro caliber safety is also the alternate reality where Trey Lance, same thing, except he's not an all-pro caliber safety. He's just like kind of good because we can't have. Come on. But yeah, I think that's what happens. But here's the alternate part of that: J-Ron Curse is a quarterback. I think is the trade-off here.
Yes, actually, yes. Kane Cookus asks, for Arif's all refs are frauds corner, it seems like a lot of face mask penalties, not just ones done to Sam Darnold, have gone uncalled recently. Luke Braun seems to think it has to do with the colors of the face masks being hard for the refs to see. Please tell me why he is wrong.
So first, I do want to make a small correction, James. The corner is named all refs is frauds, and the only reason that grammatical inconsistency is important is because that does spell out Arif. That's, I think, why Kane did it that way.
Okay, my bad. I was trying to make the reader, or trying to make the listener.
We do correct a lot of, and that's a good instinct, but in this case, it was intentional. So I did want to, by the way, a lot of our readers, you send in some questions that don't have a ton of proofreading. We are doing a little bit. James is doing a little bit of work here.
My favorite is when Arif sees a question and goes, no, I need to edit this because you will stumble on this.
Yeah, no, I very occasionally will. I clearly position myself as a deuteragonist to James's protagonist in this podcast a lot. I do sometimes throw him a bone and help him out.
It has happened before. It's Arif does occasionally have more than one feeling. It's true.
Cherish the days, right? So why is Luke Braun wrong? Well, one, come on, look at him. He's like 16 years old. Two, he's Luke Braun. He's like fundamentally evil. Three, a lot of the uncalled face mask penalties have very little to do with the ability to actually see the hand on the face mask itself. There are occasions where that's the case. And on some of those occasions, I believe there's probably a high enough contrast between the glove and the face mask that it doesn't bother me. But there's like a lot of instances where it's not it's a face mask penalty because it's the name of the penalty. But what they're grabbing is the front of the helmet. And you don't, like, the helmet is purple and the glove is white. And that's all. I don't need to explain any more than that. That's it. And you pull the helmet and then the head turns a lot. And that actually is normally what the ref is looking at. There might be a small proportion of face mask penalties that are uncalled because of this interaction of a white glove and a white face mask, right? Like that, I'm sure that is some of it. But we have seen a lot of uncalled face mask penalties. I think a lot of Vikings fans have been talking about 3. I think there might actually be 4 on Sam Darnold. But we've also seen across the league like a number of that. We've seen like a lot this year that are not just Sam Darnold related. And I think there was another Vikings player that should have gotten a face mask penalty. I'm trying to remember who was like either the last game or 2 games ago, but it was pretty recent. And we were like, oh, it's happening to all of them. But we've seen like I think Joe Burrow, but we've seen a lot of uncalled face mask penalties. So I think that there's something more systemic at play here. And I think it might have to do with the way that the league tells refs to have particular emphases in terms of what they call every year, right? So, for example, there's an emphasis this year on illegal formation penalties when tackles line up too far off the line of scrimmage, which is fine. But the trade-off is that whatever ref is responsible for that is now concentrating a little bit less on the bevy of other duties that they have, whether that includes, figuring out whether it was a false start or a, neutral zone infraction or, any number of other things, right, that will occur pre-snap that, they have to call a penalty on. Maybe it's a little bit more difficult for them to notice, like holding. It's just when you direct a ref's eyes somewhere, now you're taking it away from somewhere else. And I don't know what is the thing that they are focusing on that is preventing this, but that to me seems like a more reasonable explanation for what's happening. It could be, for example, that they're paying a lot of attention to roughing the passer penalties. And that is an emphasis that is supposed to help the offense. And so seeing it hurt the offense by like, maybe they don't see the face mask penalties or something like that can be frustrating because that is a form of unnecessary roughness, which is the broad category that roughing the passer is in. But I think that that's probably what's happening because it's happening to a lot of quarterbacks who all have different color face masks. And I think it's happening in situations where Sam Darnold is being grabbed for a face mask penalty, but it's not necessarily the face mask. And also his head is turning like 170 degrees. Like it seems like his spine is at risk, which is why the penalty exists. I think the refs should be better. I don't think it has to do with that's so frustrating to just say they got to do better. But I think they got to do better. Like, I don't think it's the contrast issue.
Next question is from Eric Thompson, who asks, for the don't talk about Doc Ellis's LSD no-hitter corner, why did you try to jinx my perfect hell season, my hell league season? Is it because I'm winning by an average of 102.3 points per week and you're jealous? Yes.
That is explicitly the reason. Yeah.
I absolutely
James is a hater.
I absolutely invoked that. The haters are. I was absolutely correct in being labeled a hater. Because in Hell League lore, I once had a season where I lost the first game and then I just ran the table.
Yeah.
And it was remarkable. I've had one undefeated season in fantasy in whatever number of years I've been doing it, and it certainly wasn't in Hell League. So I cannot abide by this happening. I'm not gonna go out of my way to like mess with his team if it didn't like deserve it.
Right, but you might double check to see if he has like a bye week violation.
Oh, I have definitely like this. I have checked. I check every team every Tuesday, but in this case, it was today. It was Thursday. But I check every team, every matchup to make sure that they did not break the rules. I may have checked his twice. Got a no going, Eric. You got a no. Skimbleshanks the Railway Cat asks, if Aaron Rodgers gained hiring and firing power within Norse Code LLC, who would be the first to go?
It would be me, right?
I would have to assume that he would be muscling in, yes.
Yeah, I mean, Aaron gets to stay probably. Sorry, other Aaron. Accountant Aaron.
Yes.
And then you probably stay longer than I do, because I have explicitly called him out in more direct ways than I think you have. And he hates being challenged as much as he loves to pretend that he cares about intellectual debate and challenging ideas. He clearly hates it.
So I would be on. I would be on until he got a quote, a friend, a professional friend to run it.
Yeah, AJ Hawk. Yeah,
absolutely. Deez is answering a question, or is asking a question rather. And again, Deez, come to the live show. I got a table for you. You
don't have to.
I got your bar tab. We'll make this work.
Okay, okay. Now you're just doing a lot. Okay, all right.
If I can't torture you with the gifts, I'll torture you with D's.
You are torturing me with the gifts.
You don't know that. For Reefs, I'm starting to hate D's making me work before this podcast corner. Who is the greatest athlete of these three? Joey Chestnut for eating. Hakuho? Sure. For sumo.
Good enough.
Or Ian Crim6 Porter, Call of Duty. Yes, they're all athletes and they all participate in sports.
You know what? I'm not even going to challenge that. Sure, let's, for the sake of this question, assume that competitive eating, Call of Duty esports, and sumo wrestling are all sports. Fine. I usually have a very permissive definition of sports, so sure. I would say, okay, so first of all, I do want to clear. There are seemingly people who think that Joey Chestnut is like a specialist when it comes to competitive eating. He is not. He has records in almost every food you can imagine. He has the record on the 72-ounce sirloin steak challenge in terms of how quickly he's eaten it. It's like 8 minutes, some crazy. You get an hour to eat it. That's a difficult thing. Look at his world. Just look at his Wikipedia page and scroll down to world records, and then gasp in awe as you realize the world records are categorized by year he broke them. It's crazy. He's got hot wings records. He's got pizza slice records. He's got pie records. If there's an eating record, he is going to go after it. So I want to say that. Second, he's in third place. So I want to get that all out there because I don't want to disrespect his accomplishments. He is not a one-note hitter here, right? Like he's doing a lot. But the problem, he's in third place. And the reason for that is because the scene is less competitive. It's like saying Don Hudson is the greatest receiver of all time because in the years he was leading the league in receiving, he was doing it by twice as many yards as the second place receiver or third place receiver, something like that. That does seem impressive, and I understand, but it was just a less competitive NFL at the time. For one, he's doing it like a lot of these are during World War II, so you've got a lot of potential players in wars, so you've depleted the talented league. It is a segregated league, and I'm not suggesting that competitive eating is segregated, but rather that the talent pool is limited because people don't respect the sport enough to encourage competition in it. Also, that is probably an unhealthier competition to encourage your kid to join than football, which it's a pretty low bar. So if you don't meet it, that's a tough place to be. But it's not as competitive of a scene, and it has nothing to do with Joey Chestnut being so far ahead of the competition that it feels uncompetitive, which is also kind of true. But before him, Kobayashi was completely unchallenged. He was also lapping the field, not just in hot dogs either. It's easy to be dominant when there's just not that many people competing. I don't want to disrespect Joey Chestnut that much. It's just like, you've put me in a spot. Second place is probably Crimsix. His accomplishments aren't as impressive as Joey Chestnut's, but Call of Duty is way more competitive of a scene than competitive eating. He has the record in total Call of Duty wins. He has 3 championships. I feel like if he had 5 championships, and it's a team sport, so it's kind of tough to do the rings thing, but I'd probably put him at number 1, but it is a difficult thing to kind of break down. I'm a lot less well-versed in esports. Were I to pick an esports GOAT, it's probably Faker from League of Legends. That's probably the one I'd pick. I could be wrong. I'm sure there's like a StarCraft 2 player that I'm just missing that's a better person for this. Yellow? I don't know. But that's fair. Hakuo is insane. His dominance in the sport is unmatched you got to understand, this is a several century long sport. And so for him to have all the records I don't know how else to, holy crap, dude. When he was competing, it was the Hakuo era, right? He dismantled a lot of anti-foreigner bias in sumo by being good. He has the sumo record, again, a several century long record. He has the sumo record for most championships. And so there's 6 tournaments every year. So he's won the most one of those tournaments, right? He has the record for longest undefeated streak. He has the record for most tournaments won while undefeated, because most championships are won with a 14-1 or 13-2 record. It's extremely difficult, of course, to go completely undefeated over the course of an entire tournament. He has the record in undefeated tournaments. He has the record in tournaments. He has the record in winning tournament winning streak and match winning streak. He has the longest string of consecutive wins. That one, I think he's tied for first in. He has every record in outstandingly competitive. In fact, the field became more competitive because of the effect that he had on foreign participation in sumo. Before, it was primarily, and I think the first tournament winner that was non-Japanese was a Hawaiian in 1972 or 76, something like that. But you got to understand, before that, it was almost entirely Japanese, and then foreigners were heavily discouraged from competing. And he did not compete in that era. He competed in a very rich, talent-rich era with more Yokozuna too. Right now, we have one Yokozuna, right? It's difficult. There's only probably 1 or 2 athletes I'm putting above Hakuo in sumo, and that's Wayne Gretzky in hockey, obviously, and then probably Serena Williams in tennis. That's kind of where we're at. Hakuo was good. He was so good.
Next question is from Yannick Eckhart, because we're not done. Which NFL player could, or perhaps you were the one who made a big deal about answering sumo questions.
But that wasn't meant to like. I just did a lot of research for one question.
Is wide open. For Arif Sumo Corner, which NFL player could, or perhaps even should, make the move and become a sumo wrestler, and who would be his pro comp?
You know what? I'm not gonna think too hard about this one. Let's say the pro comp is Hakuo. Let's just do that. Okay, so Hakuo's fighting style, obviously he was good at everything, right? But his fighting style improved substantially when he decided, instead of being a counter move sumo wrestler that relied on patience, so he admired Yokozuna, who were essentially completely emotionless and played like the psychological game, and he tried winning that way, and he wasn't attaining Yokozuna by playing that way, and he realized he just is a different type of wrestler, and so he became a more assertive, aggressive wrestler, and so he, dictates the state of the game when he's in, right? Now, obviously, he's got an explosive first step. That's huge, right? But on top of that, his hand fighting is elite. His eyes are incredible. His reaction speed is phenomenal. He is an outstanding pure athlete, right? And he's not the biggest sumo wrestler in the world, but he is the most dominant, right? And so we have to look for a player to make, because I'm doing this the other way around. Instead of trying to find a player that fits into sumo and then finding a sumo wrestler, I'm just going to see who's kind of the closest to Hakuo in terms of like physical capability. So it has to be an outstanding elite 0.01% athlete in the NFL. It has to be someone who has an explosive first step. It has to be someone who has outstanding eyes, really fast hands, a really good understanding of balance, of counter moves, of playing a psychological game, of not, engaging in like false starts a ton, and just having a good sense of the complex psychological game that's involved in sumo. The guy we just saw get 3 sacks tonight, Myles Garrett. Obviously, he's not like the body type that you'd think of as sumo. Like a lot of people might pick a nose tackle for this. And sure, Dexter Lawrence would be insane at sumo. Sure. And maybe he's my next pick. But I think it's not about size. It's about you do have to be a certain size, you do have to have a certain amount of power, but it really is just about your pure ability to understand everything that's going on and play around with leverage. And Myles Garrett is outstanding at playing around with leverage.
Let's go to our next question, and that's from Nolan Kaler, who asks, for North Code, we as a nation are surprised at Arif's dismissal of our great qualities and greatest prairie cities. Given the forecasted uptick in Americans seeking asylum, for what I assume are also turkey-hating reasons, we are willing to listen to Arif's apology if he wants to spend time hiding out in the proud and noble town of Emerson. What is something, and by the way, apparently the strip club I mentioned is closed. That's no longer an option for you. I know that was something you were holding on to hope for Emerson.
Yeah, thanks for the update.
That also, is closed.
This question wasn't in the mailbag.
No,
nope. Where are you?
This was sent to me. What is something that Arif can appreciate in Manitoba that his legion of supporters in the province will recognize and appreciate as well? He can even share it in English if he wants.
Even? What do you mean even? Okay, first of all, no. What's good about Manitoba? Like, at least Alberta doesn't have rats, right? Like, they're famous for just like not having rats, which is crazy. Because I mean, have you seen it? It's huge. I don't know how you patrol the border, make sure there aren't any rats, but there are no rats in Alberta. Okay, I'm just curious, what is, because you didn't put it in the mailbag, I didn't do research. What is Manitoba good for?
This is something that you should just know off the top of your head. Why is this something you have to Google?
Because it seems like there isn't anything it's good for. Okay, when I Googled what is Manitoba good for, the first result, I swear, is a YouTube video from Apex Geography. I've never heard of this channel before, but the title is 5 Reasons Not to Move to Manitoba. I explicitly asked for reasons it's good. What is Manitoba best known for? Having nobody. Okay, great. Sorry, I mean, what the sentence actually is, the best known features of Manitoba are its natural scenery, culture, What does that mean? And northern climate. Okay, 18 best things to do in Manitoba. All right, Canadian trainvacations.com. What do you got? Red River? Okay, 3 of these are the Red River. I know where that is. I don't need to go to Manitoba for that. National parks, thriving. I'm just going to... Where's Banff?
That's outside of Calgary, about an hour plus.
Yeah, so I'll just go to Banff if I want. I don't need... that's which is in Alberta. It's rat free too. What a boon. Why is
Winnipeg so much about
famous?
I'm learning so much about the lack of rats.
They're extremely proud of this fact, and like a lot of people have tried to prove them wrong, and that there are no rats. I guess. Which is, I mean, let's be clear. That is an astounding thing to have accomplished, right? Like that, you can't. We have to agree on that. Winnipeg is home to some of the best museums, galleries, and art venues in the country. It's also known for its music, art, and nightlife. I don't. If you're not going to name a museum, I don't know if I trust that. Okay, so one thing Manitoba is good for is not having people in it, and therefore it has a bunch of great natural scenery. It is extremely Canadian to expect an apology for saying the truth, so I'm not going to indulge in it.
Wow. Just all right. Well, let's go to.
You said we have Manitoban listeners. Did none of them write in?
Nope, just Damien, or not Damien. Sorry, just Nolan.
All right.
Let's go to Matt Freeze, who asks, "I'm interested in increasing my understanding of American civics. I have heard Arif's other podcast endorses Hillsdale College as a good way to do this. Given Arif's love of that institution, what courses could he recommend for me to take to help me expand my knowledge? Alternatively, when can I expect Arif to release a wide left takedown starring one of his sponsors like he did with gambling? Sorry, Daily Fantasy."
Oh, okay. So I do not have an encyclopedic knowledge of what my contract with Locked On Podcast says. And I may have already violated with the gambling piece anyway. But I would suggest to people, I'm gonna do this myself to see if it works out. I would suggest to people to Google. No, actually, that's bad. So I was going to suggest Google Hillsdale College and fascism, but it turns out most of the results are from Hillsdale College about the rise of what they call corporate fascism, and it's by a guy who wrote a book called Beyond Woke. So actually, don't do that. How about the Hillsdale College attempts to teach people about the political spectrum. I would suggest looking at it from both angles. So Google Hillsdale College and conservative, read a couple of articles that come up, and Hillsdale College and liberal, and read a couple of articles that come up, and then make your own decision about their explicit choices about how they choose to teach civics and history. And they have a 1776 course, I guess. I feel like they can't be mad at suggesting that you do more research on them. I feel like that's a good thing to do. So Google Hillsdale College and conservative, and also Hillsdale College and liberal, and kind of see how they go about teaching these really important civic lessons.
Yeah. Couldn't possibly go wrong there. That was a nice tightrope you just walked. Beef Brewski asks, for Arif's Tarot Corner, we're seeing an increase in AI-generated tarot decks circulating at flea markets. Is there a risk that the cards made without human influence can cause harm to the practitioner? I worry that this will affect my ESP. I'm sure you'll agree. These decks are getting harder to spot.
Okay, so one, none of this is real. That's the first. Jot that down.
I mean, if you're looking at that, I mean, AI is really just derivative anyway. So technically, this would have started from a human interaction anyway.
Right. In the same way that we are all God's creatures, AI is humans' progeny. I don't actually like the direction that goes in. Yeah. Okay. So if there is some sort of cosmic or existential concern about how a tarot deck is produced, like let's say someone makes a tarot deck and they have evil intentions in doing so. So let's remove AI from the conversation first. So let's assume that that happens, right? And that this tarot deck, as a product of having evil intention behind it, could cause harm to any practitioner. I don't know how that would happen, but if that happens, you would probably need to make sure that you've got somebody who's kind of qualified to evaluate the vibes of this tarot deck, sense the energy, kind of figure out what's going on. And I think that you can anticipate through such a rigorous process as a vibe check, whether or not it was produced with evil intentions, right? So we'll put that aside for now because that seems like that is a possibility, right? Now, an AI-generated tarot deck either has no vibes, in which case it has no impact, right? It's an empty shell. It's soulless. It cannot produce what hasn't been produced through it, right? Then there's no problem. You're just playing a card game at that point. That's fine. The other is that it carries with it the intentions of all of the influences it draws from, like James had suggested. And my understanding is that most of the people who have produced tarot art or have tried to create tarot decks, my understanding is that they overwhelmingly have positive intentions. And so the product of this is almost certainly going to be positive, even if you mix in a couple of people that have nefarious intentions. I think they're going to be overwhelmed by the amount of positivity that goes into what's happening here. Yeah. So we all kind of know that I am not a huge fan of the use of AI in art generation specifically. I think there's a lot of good use cases actually for large language models and artificial intelligence that avoids a lot of my concerns that have to do with like theft and ownership and its impact on the creation process and its impact on pipelines to creation and the ability to create original art and stuff like that. And so this doesn't speak to that. I think that those concerns will exist. But if we move past those concerns, I think that primarily the energy that's going in is going to be fairly positive. You still want to vibe check it, but I think you're more likely than not going to get a dead soulless husk, which is fine. You're just not going to be able to do tarot with it, or something that has the positive energy that you're looking for. I think those are the most likely outcomes, but you should still do a vibe check.
Next question's from Ferris Bueller, but not spelled like you would expect. I'm expecting a child born immediately after the Cardinals game. As a snowbird, though my alliances lie mostly with the Vikings, I consider the Cardinals my second team. By decree of my friends, since my child's first game will be between my primary teams, they must be nurtured as a fan of whoever wins. Is there anything I can do to ensure my child grows up with the endless disappointment of being a Vikings fan rather than the endless disappointment of being a Cardinals fan? Well, I mean, just look at it this way. Cardinals fans don't exist. We on the show have long since said that. They are crisis actors, hired on Craigslist or other websites to fill the stadium. So, if you want your child to exist, I say have them support the Vikings.
Yeah, no, there you go. That's easy.
This is longtime listeners of the show know this.
Right. Yeah. By the way, James, I think it's Ferris Bueller because iron is ferrous. So I think it was like a pun involving it. Maybe they work with iron.
I get the joke. I was just not going to spell out a joke on a podcast that
we get a lot of listeners who use puns. So I just wanted to honor that.
As somebody who both appreciates and hates them, yes. Well, let's include that for moving to the next one, which is Football's Misandrous Niche asks for Arif Aderchi corner when, because of his connections to right wing. I'm not even going to begin that. His Eminence, Peter Thiel. Okay. Arif is selected for a minor bureaucratic position in the Department of Government Efficiency. Who will naturally replace him on the Norse Code podcast? Does Arif have an understudy, or will Luke Braun finally enact dominion over the podcast? It's not as if he can shut down the podcast. James needs somewhere to launder the money.
All right, so I'm going to ask Gray's. Gray Eminence. is a shadow puppet master. I would not argue that Peter Thiel, who is part of a fund that partly owned a little bit of The Athletic, that while I was there is controlling me. But I just want to make it clear that that's not really how that works. But in a world where I am selected to work at the Department of Government Efficiency, the person that would probably replace me on Norse Code, which I agree, Norse Code needs to continue to exist because James needs to launder more money. That makes sense. It would not be Luke Braun. I would use my dirty connections to billionaire money to make sure that that does not happen. It would never be Luke Braun. I would rather. I'm not going to say revive Dusty because our official position is that he's alive. I'd rather bring Dusty back from the dead end area of
he's only mostly
podcasting.
Dead. He's only mostly dead.
I would rather bring Dusty back or have a rotating cast of Vikings bloggers that don't include Luke Braun. Yeah.
It'll be Peter Bukowski. Let's just call it that.
Jesus Christ. Okay.
Let's knock out a couple of these real quick. Logan, question for Arif's Thanksgiving Corner. We are hosting Thanksgiving dinner. It will be 4 adults and 2 kids under 4. I plan to spatchcock a chicken, but I'm worried there won't be enough leftovers. What would you recommend? A second chicken, downgrading to turkey, adding chicken segments to the roast, leg quarters, etc., or something else?
No, I wouldn't do a second chicken. Because I think that the 1 chicken for 4 adults is good enough. And then obviously you've got those 2 kids. So you're worried that there won't be leftovers. I would just add segments to the roast, additional leg quarters. That's actually pretty easy to time in and add and work, especially with a spatchcock chicken where everything is kind of a relatively uniform surface area to volume. So you don't have to worry about it too much. Plus, you get more dark meat, which rules. So I would add just a couple more segments to the roast instead of adding a whole chicken. And then obviously, don't get a turkey. Come on.
So it's time for our yearly segment, Why Arif Doesn't Like Turkey. Arif, the floor is yours.
Okay, so I just feel like every year people push back against this because it is tradition, and that is the most ridiculous. You should enjoy the holiday that is about food. You should enjoy the food. It is crazy to me that you'd go out of your way to produce subpar food and put in time and effort to produce something that it takes all of the work in the world to taste good, when if you put in half the work for any other protein, you'll get a better product. Like a lot of people every year are like, Arif, I make good Thanksgiving. Just come over to my place. I promise I'll change your mind. I believe that your turkey is good. What I don't believe is that if you had spent the same amount of time on chicken or ham or beef, that it wouldn't have produced a more enjoyable product. Turkey has a somewhat unique taste, so I understand why you might prefer turkey sometimes, but it just doesn't work because it is always dry. It is a bird that was never designed to be eaten. And yes, a lot of birds are designed to be eaten. We don't got to ask questions about that. On top of that, it is un-American to eat turkey, the original national bird of the United States. And honestly, I would take Benjamin Franklin's word over Thomas Jefferson. Benjamin Franklin didn't own slaves. I'm just going to put that out there. Maybe we should have listened to him about the national bird, the turkey. I think that makes way more sense, and we wouldn't have to deal with any of this. I may be a little bit biased towards Benjamin Franklin because I did go to Benjamin Franklin Elementary School, but I feel like that gets canceled out because I went to Thomas Jefferson High School, right? So you don't got to worry about it.
Do I have to disclose I also went to Ben Franklin?
Yeah, you didn't have to, but I'm glad you did.
Yeah.
But
full transparency.
We are in a spot where we're hustling backwards to try and make something usable and tasteable when you don't have to do that. You don't have to do that. You could just get a roast. You could just get they're like boutique, but like you could, like I've had pheasant, and pheasant it's not like agriculturally produced in ways that maximize its, cooking ability, right? And it tastes better. There's so much work to make sure that turkey isn't dry. And then on top of it, there's so much more work to make it taste good. Like you have to do both of those things. And it is crazy that you put yourself in a position where you have to do that when it's just so easy. It's just so easy to roast a chicken. I don't understand why you wouldn't do that. And the thing is, you can still get turkey flavored stuff. Buy a small turkey, turn it into gravy, and just use that in your fillings and use that on your mashed potatoes. You don't have to use a chicken gravy. You can use it, like you can do that, right? But you don't have to make a turkey. It is a trash meat. I have had tofurkey better than some of the turkeys I've had on Thanksgiving. And that is a crime. We should not be in that conversation. That's crazy. Tofurkey isn't even produced by people who know what good meat should taste like, and they did a better job, right? Like, that's crazy to me that we were ever in that situation. So don't tell me that you know how to make a good turkey. I believe you. Tell me that you know how to make a good turkey where if you'd spent an equal amount of effort on anything else, it would have been better. By the way, turkey legs, some of the most have you ever had a turkey leg at like the Ren Fair or at Valley Fair or anywhere? Try eating around those insane tendons that are stabbing you in the mouth. Awful.
I had a turkey leg this year that was worth it.
I don't believe you.
It was so good, and it's actually a food truck out of the cities. They came up and did the festival. You had to eat around all of the individual tendons that were just stabbing you. Yeah, okay.
You
did, and I actually have to say it was worth it.
He's kicking you off the show before he kicked me off the
show. That's where we're at. Logan also asks, question for Arif's therapy corner. You've mentioned on the show that you are in therapy. I have been as well, but my therapist is getting a new job and I need to find a new one. To save me time and money, could you relay some of my issues to your therapist as if they were yours and provide me their feedback? That is working smarter, not harder.
This is one of the best questions we've ever gotten. I'm going to be honest. That was great.
Tank B asks, for Arif's corner of Midwestern passive aggressiveness and garbage bird traditions. My father-in-law was insistent on us doing the feasting holiday at our home this year instead of his condo. This is fine, but on top of that, he also immediately insisted, leaving no room to counter arguments, that he do the turkey. As silly as traditions go, we all know that the way it's usually done is that the host is the one who cooks the turkey, and while acknowledging how silly that is, the fact that he has taken it is just annoying me. His turkey isn't special in the usual way of the bird. It's fine in the sense that I will not recall how it tasted immediately after eating it.
Can we just pause here in the question a little bit? Think about this. Most proteins that you have that are fine, you still are in a good enough spot to enjoy the experience. But when turkey is fine, it's tasteless. I'm just going to put that out there.
I, however, like to do a cold brine before smoking the turkey and then finish in the oven. My wife has hypothesized that maybe he thinks he's being helpful and removing some of the cost burden from us. I, however, have pointed out that the sides are generally more time-consuming and can add up in cost very quickly. Am I being more ridiculous than usual for being annoyed? What can I do to gain vengeance and make sure this presumptive move never happens again?
Outstanding question. So obviously we're taking it as a given that turkey is a necessary part of this Thanksgiving. I understand that not every family has the gift of my sanity. I get it. But assuming that we have to have turkey, right? And someone has to make it, and that his turkey is not up to the standards of your turkey, which you clearly put a lot of time and effort that you don't need to, but that you do put into the turkey. Here's my solution. Make your turkey, right? Make like the cold brine, smoke, finish in the oven. Make your evidently outstanding turkey. And instead of like replacing the entree, that's rude. Don't replace the entree, but rather put it in as many side dishes as you can possibly imagine. So it becomes obvious that the turkey you cooked is better and that the sides that you're using for it are better as a result of the turkey that you clearly cooked and made for it. Turkey hot dish, like bits of turkey in the turkey gravy, turkey in the stuffing. Just make sure the turkey is part of the side dish ensemble that you're making. And the thing about passive aggressiveness is sometimes you are taking on that additional cost and putting in that additional effort because good petty takes time. Good petty takes effort, and I believe in you.
Just doesn't believe in your turkey. Also, finally, for Arif's
I 100% believe that his turkey is better than his dad's. 100% believe it. I bet I would like tasting it.
But yes.
Yeah, father-in-law. I bet I would like tasting it. It's the effort to outcome ratio that bothers me here.
Principle of the matter. Finally, for Arif's parenting and brutal realities corner, my daughter has been learning about Thanksgiving and indigenous peoples in her 3rd grade class. But after asking some careful probing questions, I've come to the conclusion that they're teaching her the very whitewashed version of history regarding these two things. Other than showing her Addams Family 2, what can I teach her about what really happened throughout history?
Okay, this one's a tough one.
It's clearly hard.
It's hard to beat Addams Family 2 here. Actually. Yeah.
Even the scene where Pugsley is in the turkey outfits singing "Eat Me" repeatedly, I feel like that conveys an important part of Thanksgiving.
Right. I'm an insane leftist, right? I think we all know that, right? I hate America, etc. I don't know that a 3rd grader, I strongly believe a 3rd grader should not be exposed to a whitewashed version of Thanksgiving, but I don't know if they should be exposed to all of the brutal realities, right, of Thanksgiving right away. But I would maybe ask a couple of questions about how did the Pilgrims acquire that land? It feels like if that land was valuable, maybe somebody was already there. And if somebody was already there, do you think they just gave it up just 'cause? Or do you think that maybe someone took some stuff? Just ask questions about, what if your brother, or I don't know if your daughter, I don't know if you have more than one kid, but what if your best friend from elementary school discovered your room? The first person to find your, other than you, of course, but first person to find your room, discovered your room, and you're a nice person. They're tired. Maybe they need to sleep. So they start sleeping in the bed, but they won't let it go. And then they start taking the desk in your room, if you have a desk, other stuff in the room. And they start kind of using your toys. And at some point, they've worn out their welcome, especially because they're not asking you about the toy thing. And when you bring this up, they say, I discovered these toys. I'll share some of them with you as a feast to celebrate the fact that I discovered these toys. And just put that in their brain for a little bit until you teach them in 5th grade what really happened. That's got to be the age where you can teach them about genocide, right?
It's still kind of touch and go with 6th grade for my son, but yes, I think at some point...
At 7, it's marginal.
Yes, at some point... genocide is just easier to talk to about your with your kid, and at some point it does turn from Egg McMuffin to Big Mac. So just be wary of when 10:30 happens in your area. And
okay, how old are kids in 5th grade? I just want to make sure I didn't screw that one up.
About 10.
Okay, that one's tough. Oh man. Okay, yeah, 6. Yeah, 6. No, James, I think you might be right. The few instances where you're more right than me in the parenting corner.
Yes, the ones where I have to get involved because someone's going to get hurt or be trying to choke on something metal.
Wait, okay, no. We solved the metal problem. I don't know what you're talking about.
The choking portion, yes. All right, that is going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. We hope you have enjoyed it. Went a little long this time because we're going to have no episode on Thursday of next week. So, Arif, what do you have to plug?
So we've got Luke Braun's piece on Dalton Reisner versus Ed Ingram. I was kind of surprised we didn't get any questions about that. But that one kind of breaks down how Dalton Reisner did against Jeffrey Simmons and the Titans and kind of what that means for evaluating whether or not it is actually his job to keep, or if Ed Ingram's going to get a shot to win it back in the final couple of weeks of the season before the playoffs. So check that out. I've also got finally published that neoliberalism piece about the election. So check that out. That is 10,000 words, but it has gotten a super positive reception, much more than I thought. The editor I hired did an outstanding job on helping me structure that piece. So please check that out. Otherwise, just get like football stuff over at wildleft.football. Check that out. I'm over at Blue Sky at reef.bsky.social, or of course on Twitter at reefsonNFL.
So that'll be it for this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. We'll be back next week to discuss, hopefully, the victory over the Bears. So for Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening. And please remember, it's 4th and 12. I think they're going to run the ball here. And we'll be back next week. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, and wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan of... and he can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. I am your producer and host, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN or at my personal account at Big Mono. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can do so in a couple of different ways. You can go to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there. For $3.50 a month, you get bonus material and more. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode for a one-time donation, or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up some Norse Code merch. Any questions or comments that cannot fit in a tweet can be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, we thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this.
All things are possible through the power of Ben DiNucci.